Good evening, night owls, and welcome to Whisper Crowley, the place where stories linger long after the lights go out. Tonight, we prepared chilling tales paired with the soothing sound of rain to ignite your imagination and make your heart race. If you feel the cold creeping in, tap that like button. It helps keep the shadows alive. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from or share the scariest moment that sent shivers down your spine. Don't forget to subscribe. You wouldn't want to miss what lurks in the darkness ahead. Have you ever felt like your home was hiding something? Something just beyond the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? I used to think it was just a figment of my imagination, a trick of the mind in the solitude of my small apartment. But one evening, as the light faded and shadows danced along the walls, I noticed something peculiar. Fine cracks began to appear on the plaster. At first, they were hardly noticeable, thin, almost hairline fissures that crept like spider silk across the walls of my living room. I brushed them off, thinking they were merely a sign of age, a byproduct of the old building settling. The air was thick with the scent of dampness, a reminder that my apartment was once a grand structure, now weathered by time. But as days turned into weeks, those cracks began to grow, stretching and splintering like dry branches reaching for the sky. One night, as I lay in bed, the soft hum of the city outside my window wrapped around me like a blanket. I could hear the distant sounds of traffic, the occasional laughter of neighbors echoing through the hall. But then, something shifted. The air turned heavy, and the familiar sounds faded into an unsettling silence. It was then that I heard it, a faint rustling, like paper being crumpled. My heart raced as I strained to listen, eyes wide in the darkness. The sound seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, as if the cracks were alive, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to know. The following morning, I approached the largest crack, which had now grown to a noticeable length, curving ominously across the surface. My fingers traced the jagged edge, and I felt a strange coldness emanating from within. I took a step back, an instinctive shiver running down my spine. The thought that there was something hidden behind those walls, something waiting to emerge, filled me with dread. As the days passed, my unease deepened. I noticed more cracks appearing, each accompanied by that disconcerting rustling sound. It began to feel like I was being watched, the walls closing in around me, their presence suffocating. My neighbors seemed oblivious, going about their lives, while I felt increasingly isolated. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, and I was powerless to stop it. One evening, while I sat in my dimly lit living room, a particularly loud noise broke the silence. It was a sharp crack, like a branch snapping in the dead of winter. I jumped to my feet, heart pounding, and rushed to the source. The largest crack had split wider, and I could see a shadow flickering within. I froze, fear washing over me like icy water. It felt as if the very walls of my home were breathing, a slow, deliberate inhale that echoed in my chest. What was happening to my home? Why were these cracks appearing now, and what was lurking behind them? As night fell, I resolved to find out. I would confront whatever lay beyond, whether it was a figment of my imagination or something more sinister. I took a deep breath, the taste of fear lingering on my tongue, and prepared myself for the darkness that awaited. Little did I know, the true horror was only just beginning. The night was thick with silence as I gathered my courage. My heart raced, each beat echoing in the stillness of the room. The air felt electric, charged with an anticipation that was both thrilling and terrifying. I approached the crack again, the shadow inside shifting ever so slightly, teasing my curiosity. I had to know what was hiding there. With a trembling hand, I reached for my phone, the dim light casting eerie shadows across the walls. I illuminated the crack, peering into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing but the rough texture of the plaster, but then something shifted, a flicker of movement, almost imperceptible. It was enough to send chills racing down my spine. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling. It felt foolish to speak into the void, but the instinct to reach out was overpowering. The only response was the soft rustling, now louder, more distinct. It was as if something was acknowledging me from within the wall, and I stepped back, breathless with fear. Days turned into an endless loop of anxiety and dread. The cracks multiplied, twisting and turning, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to mock me. Each night, the noises grew louder, evolving from soft whispers to a cacophony of shuffling sounds. I could almost make out the rhythm of footsteps, deliberate and unnerving, echoing in my mind as I tried to sleep. The walls felt alive, as if they were conspiring against me. I began to notice changes in my environment. The air turned colder, a frigid draft creeping through the apartment. My neighbors were still oblivious, their laughter and chatter echoing through the thin walls, but I felt more isolated than ever. I was trapped in my own home, a prisoner of my own fears. Desperate for answers, I turned to the internet, researching strange occurrences, urban legends, anything that might explain what I was experiencing. I stumbled upon tales of haunted houses, of families who had faced similar phenomena. They spoke of things lurking just out of sight, of entities that fed off fear, growing stronger as their victims weakened. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. What if that was what I was facing? One evening, I could no longer bear the weight of my anxiety. I decided to confront the crack head-on. Armed with a flashlight and a hammer, I approached the wall, my resolve stealing with each step. The shadow within writhed, and I took a deep breath, steadying my shaking hands. I was going to break through, to unveil whatever lay behind the facade. With a swift blow, I struck the wall. The sound echoed like thunder, and the crack widened, splinters of plaster flying. My heart raced as I peered into the newly formed opening. The darkness within seemed to pulse, a living entity staring back at me. And then I heard it, a low, guttural growl reverberating through the air. I stumbled back, fear wrapping around me like a vice. The walls were closing in, the atmosphere thick with menace. The crack was no longer just a fissure, it was a portal, a gateway to something unspeakable. I could feel its presence, a weight pressing down on me, suffocating and terrifying. What had I unleashed? As I stumbled back, I caught a glimpse of something shifting in the shadows, a silhouette, vague and indistinct, but undeniably there. My mind raced with questions, but the primal instinct to flee took over. I had to escape the growing darkness, the malevolent force lurking just beyond the surface. With my heart pounding in my chest, I dashed toward the door, the sensation of being pursued igniting every ounce of adrenaline within me. The sounds intensified, a cacophony of whispers and footsteps echoing in my ears. I could feel it behind me, breathing down my neck, as I flung the door open and raced into the hallway. But as I stepped into the light of the corridor, I realized the terror wasn't just in the walls, it was within me, an inescapable shadow that I couldn't outrun. The cracks had only just begun to grow. The hallway stretched before me, an unsettling silence enveloping the space. My breath came in ragged gasps, each step echoing against the warm floorboards. I glanced back, half expecting to see the shadows spilling out of my apartment, but all was still. The oppressive weight of fear clung to me like a fog, thick and suffocating. I rushed down the stairs, each footfall reverberating in my chest. I needed to escape, to find someone who could help me understand what was happening. But as I reached the ground floor, the familiar sounds of the outside world seemed distant, muted. I pushed through the front door, stepping into the cool night air, but the relief was short-lived. The city felt strangely altered, as if the streets were twisted by an unseen hand. I wandered aimlessly, the vibrant lights of the city blurring into a haze. My mind raced with possibilities. What had I awakened in my home? What was it that lay behind those cracks? The fear that had once seemed like a distant whisper now surged through me like a tidal wave. I found a bench in a small park and sat, hoping to gather my thoughts. But there was no solace to be found. Every rustle of leaves, every distant laugh seemed like a taunt. I could almost hear the whispers of the cracks in my walls echoing around me, the sinister growls that had chased me down the hallway. It was clear that I couldn't ignore this any longer. I needed to confront it, to uncover the truth behind the growing fissures. As dawn approached, I made my way back to my apartment, the sun casting long shadows that seemed to follow me. I stepped inside, the air thick with a lingering chill. I hesitated at the door, my hand hovering over the handle. The darkness behind those walls felt like a living entity, a sinister pulse that quickened with my every movement. Once inside, I armed myself with a flashlight and a sturdy knife. I steeled my nerves, knowing I couldn't let fear dictate my actions any longer. The cracks loomed before me, the largest one gaping wide like a maw ready to swallow me whole. I approached, the light from my flashlight trembling in my grip. As I drew closer, I felt an unsettling draft, as if the very air were being pulled into the crack. I braced myself and shone the light into the darkness. The beam flickered across the jagged edges, revealing something glimmering deep within. My heart raced with a mix of terror and curiosity. I had to know what it was. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, and the growl erupted again, louder and more insistent. Panic surged through me as I turned to run, but something gripped my ankle, pulling me back. I fell to the ground, the coldness of the floor biting into my skin. I twisted around, shining my light toward the source of the pull. What I saw froze me in place. From the crack, a shadowy figure began to emerge, elongated and twisted, its form barely human. It moved with an unnatural fluidity, as if it was both part of the wall and something entirely other. I struggled to free myself, but the grip tightened, an icy hand wrapped around my leg. I yelled, the sound echoing in the empty room, but it was swallowed by the cacophony of whispers that erupted from the walls. The figure loomed closer, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness, two orbs of malice that bore into my soul. I could feel its hunger, a desire that clawed at the edges of my mind, urging me to give in to despair. I fought against the terror, my instincts screaming at me to flee. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, I managed to wrench my leg free, scrambling back against the wall. The figure hesitated, as if sensing my defiance. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not become its prey. I lunged for the hammer I had dropped, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice a raw mix of fear and determination. The entity recoiled, the whispers escalating into a furious howl, the walls trembling as if the very building protested against my defiance. But I could feel the cracks shifting, growing wider, hungry for the darkness to spill forth. I had to act quickly. With a fierce swing, I struck at the crack, each blow resonating with the frantic beating of my heart. The walls shuddered, a low rumble vibrating through the air. Suddenly, the shadows exploded outward, the figure retreating into the depths of the crack, its ghastly whispers merging into a terrifying crescendo. I kept swinging, not stopping until the crack splintered further, sending fragments of plaster flying. The entity was forced back, and I felt a rush of triumph even as the fear clawed at my insides. With one last desperate strike, I hit the wall, and the shadow dissolved into a cloud of darkness, swallowed by the light of my flashlight. The room fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting as the cracks began to recede, as if the walls were sealing themselves once more. But as I stood there, panting and trembling, I realized that I had only bought myself time. The true battle had just begun. The cracks might have retreated for now, but the fear remained an indelible mark on my psyche. I was not just fighting a darkness in my home, I was battling the shadows within myself, the isolation and despair that had taken root in my heart. And I knew, deep down, that I would have to face it again. The silence in my apartment was disorienting. The oppressive shadows that had clung to the corners of my home now seemed to hover just out of reach, but I could feel their lingering presence. Even though the immediate threat had retreated, a sense of unease gnawed at my insides. I was left with the remnants of a battle that had only scratched the surface of my fears. Days turned into a blur as I tried to return to a semblance of normalcy. I went through the motions of daily life, but every creak of the floorboards and distant rumble of traffic reminded me of the darkness lurking just beyond my walls. The cracks had not reappeared, but I felt the weight of what I had encountered press down on me, a constant reminder of the unknown. As night fell, I became a prisoner in my own home. The walls that once felt familiar now felt like a cage. Sleep evaded me, and I spent countless hours staring at the ceiling, wrestling with the echoes of that shadowy figure. I often replayed the confrontation in my mind, searching for a sense of victory, but the fear remained raw and potent. One evening, I decided to confront my memories head-on. I pulled out my journal, a place where I could pour out my thoughts without judgment. I wrote about the cracks, the entity, and the overwhelming terror that had filled my heart. I thought that perhaps by putting pen to paper, I could exorcise some of the fear that had seeped into my very being. But as I wrote, the room began to change. A cold draft swept through, causing the pages to flutter violently. I paused, glancing around as the shadows deepened, creeping along the walls. My breath caught in my throat, and a sense of dread settled over me. I felt as though the darkness was responding to my words, as if it was feeding off my fear. Suddenly, the rustling sound returned, a low whisper that seemed to crawl along the walls. Panic surged through me. I closed the journal and stood, heart racing, ready to face whatever was coming. The whispers grew louder, transforming into a haunting chorus of voices, muffled, indistinct, but undeniably present. I moved cautiously toward the source, my flashlight trembling in my grasp. The air felt charged with energy, thick with an oppressive weight. The walls, once just plaster and paint, now seemed to pulsate, alive with an unseen force. I reached the largest crack, which had sealed itself after our last encounter, but now it trembled, as if beckoning me closer. "Show yourself," I shouted, trying to summon the courage I had felt before. But my voice wavered, fear clawing at my resolve. The shadows within flickered, and the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of cries and laughter that chilled my bones. I could feel the darkness pulling at me, tempting me to give in, to let go of the fight. I took a deep breath, determined not to be consumed. "You don't owe me," I declared, brandishing my flashlight. The light cut through the darkness, illuminating the crack in a harsh glow. For a brief moment, the shadows recoiled, their whispers turning into a cacophony of rage. But then, as if sensing my defiance, the voices shifted. They transformed into my own memories, echoes of my insecurities, my loneliness, my failures. Each whisper became a reminder of my past, clawing at my self-worth, telling me I would never escape the darkness. I staggered back, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions. In that moment, I realized the truth. The entity was not just a manifestation of the darkness in my walls, but a reflection of the fears I had buried deep within myself. The isolation, the loneliness, the constant struggle with my own thoughts, they had all formed this creature that now haunted my home. As the realization struck, a surge of determination washed over me. I would not let it win. I had faced it once, and I could do it again. I would confront my fears and not let them consume me. I raised the flashlight, the beam piercing through the shadows. I refused to be afraid. I shouted, the words echoing in the room. The whispers faltered, a moment of silence enveloping the space before the shadows surged forward, furious and insistent. But this time, I stood my ground. I swung the flashlight toward the crack, illuminating the darkness with unwavering light. You are nothing but echoes of my past. You cannot control me. I cried, my voice growing stronger with each word. The shadows recoiled, the whispers transforming into a wail of despair. The crack trembled, and I could feel the entity fighting against the light, desperate to drag me back into the depths of fear. But I pressed forward, determined to break the cycle. With one final surge of energy, I hurled the flashlight directly into the crack. The impact resonated through the room, and the shadows writhed in agony, shrieking as they were pushed back. The light enveloped the darkness, illuminating the once terrifying entity until it dissipated into nothingness, leaving behind a quiet stillness. I fell to my knees, gasping for breath as the weight lifted from my shoulders. The walls were silent, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I felt a flicker of hope. I had faced my fears and emerged victorious, at least for now. But deep down, I knew this was only a temporary reprieve. The darkness could return, and I would need to confront it again. I had learned that the cracks in my walls were more than just physical. They were a part of me, a reflection of the battles I had fought within my own mind. And as I sat in the stillness of my apartment, I resolved to continue this fight, to explore the depths of my own darkness. For in understanding my fears, I might finally learn to live without their suffocating grip. But little did I know, the true test was yet to come. The calm that enveloped my apartment felt surreal. For the first time in weeks, the air was still, and the oppressive weight of fear had lifted. But a lingering anxiety remained, whispering that this was merely a moment of reprieve. I could still feel the echoes of the darkness, the shadows lingering just beyond the threshold of my awareness. Days passed, and I tried to rebuild my routine. I immersed myself in work, reconnected with friends, and forced myself to step outside, breathing in the fresh air that felt foreign yet invigorating. But the cracks in my mind had not fully healed. At night, I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the fear of what might return. I needed to confront this once and for all. One evening, I decided to invite a friend over, hoping that their presence would distract me from the shadows that crept back into my mind. I brewed tea and lit candles, filling the space with warmth and light. As we laughed and shared stories, I felt a flicker of normalcy. But as darkness fell and my friend left, the shadows returned, creeping along the walls, reminding me of the battle I had fought. That night, as I lay in bed, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. They swirled around me, a tempest of doubt and fear that choked the air. I gripped my pillow, trying to drown them out, but it was futile. I could feel the entity stirring, lurking just beyond the veil of my consciousness. Determined to confront this once more, I rose from bed, the chill of the night air prickling my skin. I grabbed my journal and a pen, ready to write down my fears, to expose them to the light of day. I began to jot down every doubt, every insecurity that plagued me. As I wrote, the whispers seemed to shift, as if reacting to my words. Your past will always haunt you, one voice hissed, slicing through the air like a blade. You are alone, and you will always be alone. No, I whispered, defiantly shaking my head. You don't control me anymore. I pushed forward, filling page after page with my thoughts, confronting the darkness with every stroke of the pen. But as I continued, the walls began to shudder, the shadows swirling more violently around me. The air grew heavy, and I felt the familiar chill creep in. The crack in the wall throbbed with a sinister pulse, and I knew the entity was awakening. With newfound determination, I moved toward the crack, the weight of my fears pressing down on me. I stood before it, flashlight in one hand and my journal in the other. I will not let you win, I declared, my voice steady, unwavering. I will face you. As I shone the light into the crack, the shadows recoiled momentarily, but the whispers erupted into a cacophony, each voice vying for attention. You're nothing. You're weak, they screamed, a torrent of rage and desperation flooding my mind. The figure I had encountered before materialized from the shadows, its form twisting and shifting, an amalgamation of my darkest thoughts. I felt the fear clawing at my insides, but I forced myself to remember the strength I had found. You are a reflection of my fears, I shouted. You are not real. You cannot hurt me. The entity surged forward, dark tendrils reaching out, wrapping around me like chains. I could feel the coldness seeping into my bones, the suffocating grip tightening. But I closed my eyes, focusing on my heartbeat, grounding myself in the present moment. I am not alone. I am stronger than you think, I repeated, my voice gaining power with each affirmation. In a moment of clarity, I opened my eyes and directed the flashlight toward the heart of the darkness. I will not let you define me, I shouted. The light sliced through the shadows, illuminating the dark figure, forcing it to retreat. The room trembled as I pressed forward, determined to reclaim my space. You are nothing but a shadow, I yelled, swinging the flashlight again. The entity writhed, its form flickering as the light grew brighter, pushing against the darkness that had once held me captive. With one final surge of strength, I swung the flashlight with all my might, sending it crashing against the wall. The crack splintered wider, and the figure howled, its voice rising to a deafening crescendo. No, it cried, the sound filled with rage and despair. As the light engulfed the room, the shadows began to dissolve, the whispers fading into a distant echo. I stood firm, heart pounding, as the darkness retreated. The entity crumbled before my eyes, dissipating into a cloud of nothingness, leaving only silence in its wake. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and for the first time, I felt a sense of liberation. I had faced my fears, confronted the darkness that had threatened to consume me, and emerged victorious. But as I sat there, I realized that the battle against fear is never truly over. It would always linger in the background, waiting for moments of vulnerability. Yet, I had learned a powerful truth. I was not defined by my fears. I could confront them, learn from them, and grow stronger. With a deep breath, I picked up my journal, filled with my thoughts and experiences. I knew it would be a long journey toward healing, but I was ready to face it, one step at a time. The cracks in my walls might have been a manifestation of fear, but they also served as a reminder of my resilience. And as I looked around my apartment, now filled with light and possibility, I knew I would never let the shadows take hold again. The darkness may return, but I would stand ready, prepared to fight back, because I was no longer afraid. What would you do if you woke up one morning and found a pair of socks by your bed that definitely did not belong to you? Would you dismiss it as a prank or a figment of your imagination? Or would you feel an unsettling chill creeping up your spine, a whisper of something far more sinister? I awoke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through the curtains. It was a typical Tuesday morning. The world outside my window was slowly coming to life, but something was off. As I shifted in bed, my foot brushed against something that felt foreign. My heart raced as I looked down, and there they were, two mismatched socks lying innocently on the floor beside my bed. One was a vibrant red with white polka dots, the other a faded blue with a small green stripe. I frowned, puzzled. I lived alone, and I couldn't recall ever owning socks like these. Dismissing it as a harmless prank from a friend, I kicked them aside, shaking off the feeling of unease. I got up, made coffee, and tried to carry on with my day. But as the hours passed, the socks remained etched in my mind. I glanced back at the spot by my bed, half expecting them to have vanished. Instead, they lay exactly where I had left them, mocking me with their very presence. I took a deep breath and decided to toss them into the trash bin. Later that evening, I returned home, feeling strangely unsettled. The shadows in my apartment seemed to stretch longer than usual. I shook off the feeling, reminding myself that it was just my imagination. I was tired and overworked, after all. But as I entered my bedroom, a chill ran down my spine. There, by my bed, was the unmistakable sight of those same socks. My breath hitched in my throat, disbelief mixing with an unsettling sense of dread. How could this be? I had thrown them away, hadn't I? I approached cautiously, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. My heart thudded loudly in my chest as I reached down to pick them up. The fabric felt warm against my fingers, as if they had just been worn. I dropped them back to the floor, feeling a sudden wave of nausea wash over me. My mind raced. Was someone playing a sick joke on me? Or was I losing my grip on reality? I felt the walls of my apartment closing in, suffocating me with an overwhelming sense of isolation. I could almost hear the whispers of my thoughts echoing around me, each one amplifying my fear. That night, sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned, every creak of the house a reminder that I was not alone. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the occasional rustle from outside. Each sound felt like a prelude to something sinister, something waiting just out of sight. I finally dozed off, but the dreams that invaded my sleep were anything but comforting. I was lost in a dark corridor, the scent of dampness and something acrid filling the air. Shadows danced just beyond the edges of my vision, teasing me with glimpses of figures that felt too familiar yet utterly foreign. The sound of soft footsteps echoed, growing louder, closer. I could feel their presence pressing in on me, suffocating and relentless. When I awoke, drenched in sweat, the morning light felt harsh against my skin. I stumbled out of bed, desperate to shake off the remnants of the nightmare. But as I blinked the sleep from my eyes, my heart sank. There, yet again, lay the socks, undisturbed in their spot by the bed. This time, panic gripped me. I grabbed my phone and dialed my best friend, hoping for some clarity. When the line connected, I could hear the grogginess in their voice. I quickly recounted the bizarre occurrences, but as I spoke, doubt crept in. Would they think I was losing it? Would they dismiss my fears as trivial? You're probably just stressed, they suggested. Maybe you're seeing things. You've been working so hard lately. As I hung up, a wave of despair washed over me. I felt trapped, isolated in my own mind. What if they were right? What if I was spiraling into madness? I needed to find a way to regain control. That evening, I decided to conduct an experiment. I resolved to stay awake, to watch the socks and confront whatever was happening. I brewed coffee and sat up in the corner of my room, ready to observe. Time stretched on, and fatigue tugged at my eyelids, but I refused to give in. As the clock ticked toward midnight, the atmosphere thickened. The shadows flickered, almost as if they were alive, and I felt an invisible weight pressing down on me. The room grew colder, and I could hear the faintest rustling sound, like a soft whisper carried by the wind. I was on high alert, every nerve in my body tingling with anticipation. And then, just as I had begun to doubt my resolve, I heard it, a soft thud followed by the unmistakable sound of fabric sliding across the floor. My heart raced as I turned to face the source of the noise. There, in the dim light, the socks moved. They shifted, as if being pulled by an unseen force. My breath caught in my throat, fear coursing through my veins. I leaped to my feet, adrenaline surging as I stumbled back. I had to confront this, had to understand what was happening, or I would lose my mind. But before I could react, the socks flung themselves toward me, landing at my feet as if daring me to approach. I froze, caught in a web of confusion and terror. What did they want from me? My heart raced as I slowly knelt down, reaching for them. And in that moment, as I grasped the soft fabric in my hand, a blinding light enveloped the room. The shadows shrank back, revealing a figure standing just beyond the light, a silhouette of a person, eyes glinting in the dark. "Why are you here?" I croaked, my voice trembling. The figure remained silent, just watching. I could feel the weight of their gaze, the chill of their presence. In that instant, I realized that I was not just confronting the socks, I was facing the manifestation of my fears, my anxieties. The absurdity of the situation hit me hard, but it was too late to turn back. I was standing at the precipice of my own sanity, and I had to decide, would I let this presence consume me, or would I fight back against the encroaching darkness? The figure remained still, shrouded in darkness, and I felt as if I were staring into an abyss. The socks lay at my feet, a bizarre symbol of my fear. I took a shaky step forward, desperate to break the tension that hung heavy in the air. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper. But the figure didn't respond. Instead, it seemed to grow larger, more imposing, as if feeding off my fear. I could feel the air grow colder, my breath misting in front of me. The silence was deafening, and I could hear my heart pounding in my ears. The socks, once mere fabric, now felt like the key to this strange encounter. I bent down to pick them up, hoping that by confronting this absurdity, I could dispel the darkness. But as I lifted them, a shiver coursed through my body, and I suddenly felt a deep sense of isolation wash over me. I was utterly alone in this fight. The figure stepped forward, and I recoiled, my instincts screaming at me to run. But where could I go? This was my home, and I had already pushed away any semblance of normalcy. With every ounce of courage I could muster, I held the socks out like a shield. "If you want these, then take them. I refuse to be afraid of you." The moment I spoke, the figure paused. It tilted its head, and in that brief moment, I caught a glimpse of familiarity, like a long-forgotten memory. Was it my imagination, or did the figure mirror my own reflection? The air thickened, and I felt an intense pressure in my chest. "You don't belong here," I shouted, my voice ringing with desperation. "I'm not afraid of you." But as the words left my mouth, the figure began to dissolve, shifting and swirling like smoke. I felt a strange connection to it, as if it were a part of me I had long ignored. My heart raced as realization struck. This entity was not just an external threat. It embodied all my insecurities, doubts, and fears. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and the room darkened, plunging me into shadows once more. I stumbled back, the socks slipping from my grip and landing on the floor. The figure reformed, closer now, its outline sharpening. "You cannot escape," it seemed to whisper, the sound echoing in my mind. I had to confront this. My instinct screamed at me to flee, but I stood my ground, determined to face whatever this was. "Why are you doing this?" I cried out, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" In response, the figure raised a hand, and I felt a rush of memories flood my mind, moments of failure, loneliness, and self-doubt. I saw myself as a child, standing alone on a playground while others played together. I felt the sting of rejection when I didn't make the team, the suffocating silence of my apartment when I isolated myself after a breakup. Each memory hit me like a punch to the gut, forcing me to confront the darkness I had kept hidden. "Stop!" I yelled, clenching my fists. "I won't let you control me." In that moment of clarity, I understood that I had been allowing these fears to dictate my life. I had been so consumed by them that they had taken on a life of their own. It was time to take back my power. I took a deep breath, grounding myself in the present. "I am stronger than you think," I declared, my voice firm. "You are just shadows in my mind." I picked up the socks, feeling their soft fabric between my fingers. "You don't scare me anymore." With each word, I felt the energy shift. The figures seemed to waver, the memories receding as I focused on the light of my own strength. I took a step closer, holding the socks out like a talisman. "I will not allow you to haunt me." The darkness began to dissipate, swirling around like fog lifting in the morning sun. The figure flickered, its outline growing fainter as I embraced my memories rather than fearing them. "You are a part of me, but you will not control me," I stated, the conviction in my voice growing stronger. The room began to brighten, the shadows receding until all that remained was a gentle glow. The figure collapsed into itself, no longer menacing but instead transformed into something more ethereal, a representation of my past, but now it felt lighter, less threatening. As the light engulfed me, I felt a warmth spreading through my chest. I had faced my fears and come out on the other side. The socks lay on the floor, no longer a source of anxiety, but rather a reminder of my resilience. I took a deep breath, the air feeling clean and invigorating. I looked around my room, now filled with light. The shadows that once felt so oppressive had lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of clarity. But I knew that this battle was just the beginning. The darkness would return in different forms, perhaps as new fears or insecurities. I had to remain vigilant, ready to confront whatever came my way. With renewed determination, I picked up the socks and walked to the trash can, holding them tightly in my hands. As I dropped them inside, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I turned away from the bin and took a moment to appreciate the peace that had returned to my home. Yet, deep down, a part of me wondered, would the socks return? Would I have to face this fear again? I didn't have the answers, but for now, I felt ready to embrace whatever the future held. As I settled into bed that night, the warmth of the light enveloped me, and I drifted into a deep, restful sleep. But even in my dreams, I felt the lingering presence of those strange socks, reminding me that while I had faced my fears today, the journey was far from over. Days turned into weeks, and for a time, I felt a sense of calm that had eluded me for so long. The strange socks no longer haunted my thoughts, and I began to reclaim my life. I threw myself into work, reconnected with friends, and embraced a newfound freedom. Yet, despite the progress, a nagging doubt remained, a whisper in the back of my mind that warned me to stay vigilant. One evening, I returned home, the sun sinking low in the sky, casting long shadows across my living room. As I dropped my bag by the door, a familiar chill ran down my spine. I brushed it off, dismissing the sensation as leftover anxiety from my previous experiences. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping to prepare a comforting dinner. But as I set to work, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye. My heart sank as I turned slowly toward my bedroom door. There, lying on the floor just outside the threshold, was a single sock. It was a faded blue, just like the one I had tossed away weeks ago. Panic surged through me, a wave of cold dread crashing over my skin. How could this be? I had discarded everything associated with that night, determined to rid myself of the past. My mind raced, conjuring thoughts of someone sneaking into my home, or worse, that I had truly begun to lose my grip on reality. I approached the sock cautiously, the air around me thickening. As I knelt down, I felt the familiar warmth radiating from the fabric, just as I had when I first confronted the entity. This time, however, I was unprepared for what lay ahead. I picked it up gingerly, and the moment I did, the lights in the room flickered, plunging me into a dim twilight. A low whisper curled through the air, sending shivers racing down my spine. "You thought you could escape?" it taunted, echoing off the walls. The shadows around me deepened, and I felt the presence returning, creeping back into my life like a ghost. "No," I gasped, shaking my head as if that could dispel the darkness. "You're not real. You're just my fears." But as the words left my lips, I felt a pulse of energy, and the room began to shift. The walls twisted, and the familiar sights of my home morphed into a cavernous void, echoing with the sound of distant footsteps. Panic surged through me as I realized I was no longer in my apartment. I had been drawn into the depths of my own mind. The figure materialized again, looming larger than before. "You cannot run from me," it said, its voice chillingly calm. "You will face what you truly fear." In that moment, the realization struck me, this was not just about the socks. It was about everything I had buried, the doubts, the failures, the feelings of inadequacy that had haunted me for years. I was being forced to confront the darkest corners of my psyche, and it terrified me. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, trying to muster strength. "What do you want?" "I want you to see," the figure replied, its voice echoing around me like a haunting melody. "You cannot escape the truth that lies within you." As the darkness swirled around me, images flashed before my eyes, my childhood, my mistakes, my fears, all blending into one chaotic tapestry. I was submerged in memories, each one dragging me deeper into despair. I struggled against the tide, but the shadows were relentless. I felt myself slipping, drowning in a sea of negativity. The figure loomed closer, its face now more defined, a grotesque reflection of my own self-doubt. "You will never be good enough," it hissed. "You are destined to fail." "No!" I screamed, clenching my fists. "I am enough. I will not let you win." With each word, I began to push back against the darkness. The memories surged, trying to pull me under, but I fought with everything I had. I thought of the progress I had made, the moments of joy and connection I had found despite the shadows that lurked. "I am stronger than you think," I shouted, my voice ringing with defiance. "You do not control me. I refuse to let you dictate my worth." The figure hesitated, and in that fleeting moment, I took a step forward. "You are part of me, but you will not define me," I declared, holding the sock up like a banner of resilience. "I will embrace my fears and learn from them. I will not run away." With that declaration, a light burst forth from within me, illuminating the dark void. The shadows recoiled, and I could feel the weight of the figure beginning to lift. As the light expanded, I reached for the entity, willing to integrate it rather than fight it. The figure faltered, its form beginning to dissipate as I stood my ground. "You will always be a part of me," I said softly. "But you do not have power over me." As the light enveloped us both, the darkness shattered, and I felt a rush of clarity and understanding. The memories, once so painful, transformed into lessons, each one shaping who I had become. I felt the weight of my fears lift, replaced by an empowering sense of acceptance. When the light faded, I found myself back in my bedroom, the sock still clutched in my hand. The shadows were gone, replaced by the soft glow of my lamp. I looked around, heart racing, feeling a sense of peace settle within me. I dropped the sock onto the floor, realizing that it no longer held power over me. It was a reminder of my journey, a testament to my growth. I had faced the shadows, embraced my fears, and emerged stronger. But as I settled back into bed, the familiar chill lingered in the air, and I wondered if this battle was truly over. Would I have to confront the darkness again? I didn't know, but I felt a newfound strength coursing through me. I could face whatever came next. And with that thought, I closed my eyes, ready to embrace the uncertain journey ahead. Days turned into weeks once again, and I found a new rhythm in my life. The strange sock incident had become a part of my past, a chapter one had closed. But the shadows of that experience lingered like an echo, a reminder of the battles I had faced within myself. Each morning, I would wake with a sense of purpose, but there was always a part of me that felt on edge, as if I were waiting for the other shoe to drop. One evening, I decided to invite a few friends over for dinner, hoping to fill my home with laughter and light. I prepared a meal, letting the comforting aromas waft through the air as I set the table. The sound of their laughter filled the space, washing away the remnants of solitude that had once clung to me. But as the night wore on, a subtle unease began to creep back in. I found myself glancing at the corner of the room, half expecting to see the faint outline of the figure from my past. Each time I caught myself looking, I felt a twinge of embarrassment, as if my friends could sense my fear. After dinner, we moved to the living room, where the conversation flowed easily, and I laughed along, trying to ignore the nagging thoughts. But then, as we settled onto the couch, something caught my eye, a flash of color in the corner. My heart raced as I turned to look. There, by the bookshelf, was another sock. This one was vibrant green with yellow stripes. "No, no, no," I muttered under my breath. I could feel the panic rising, threatening to overwhelm me. How could this be happening again? I had thrown away the last sock, banished the shadows. Trying to remain composed, I laughed it off. "Looks like I've got a sock thief in the house," I joked, hoping my friends wouldn't notice the tremor in my voice. I stood up, moving toward the sock, my heart pounding. As I approached, I felt the room grow colder. The laughter faded into silence, my friends now watching me with curious eyes. I bent down to pick up the sock, and as my fingers brushed against it, the world around me seemed to shift. The light dimmed, and I could feel the familiar weight of dread settling in. "What's wrong?" one of my friends asked, concern etched across her face. It's nothing," I stammered, forcing a smile. But deep inside, I felt the shadows creeping back, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. I turned back to my friends, trying to focus on their faces, but the sock lay heavy in my hand. The laughter from moments before felt distant, replaced by an echoing silence that resonated in my mind. I could sense the figure lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In a moment of panic, I tossed the sock into the nearest trash can, a desperate attempt to rid myself of the threat. "Let's play a game," I suggested, trying to redirect the energy in the room. "Who's up for some charades?" The laughter returned, but it felt forced, like a fragile mask I wore to hide my fear. As we played, I struggled to shake the feeling of unease that clung to me. The shadows in the corners of my mind began to stir, threatening to disrupt the fragile peace I had worked so hard to build. After my friends left, I felt a profound sense of emptiness. I stood in the living room, staring at the trash can where I had tossed the sock. The darkness seemed to thrum with anticipation, like a predator waiting for its moment. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to confront the reality of the situation. This wasn't just about the sock, it was about the unresolved fears that still lingered in my heart. I had tried to bury them, but they were waiting for the right moment to resurface. That night, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of avoiding my fears, I would invite them in. I gathered my thoughts, sitting cross-legged on the floor, and closed my eyes. I focused on the feelings of anxiety and dread, allowing them to wash over me like a wave. "Show me what you want," I whispered into the silence. "I'm ready to face you." As I sat there, the shadows began to coalesce around me, forming the figure I had encountered before. This time, it was not intimidating, it felt almost familiar. "You've been running," it said, its voice softening. "But you cannot hide from me. I am a part of you." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. "But I won't let you control me anymore. I want to understand why you keep coming back." The figure nodded, and the air around us shifted. Suddenly, I was engulfed in a series of memories, moments from my childhood, my struggles, the fear of judgment, and the ache of loneliness. Each scene played out like a movie, revealing the roots of my anxieties. "Why do you haunt me?" I asked, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "I am the reflection of your self-doubt," it replied. "You have buried me deep within, but I will always return until you acknowledge me." I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I had been trying to ignore these feelings, pushing them aside instead of confronting them. "What do I need to do?" I asked, vulnerability creeping into my voice. "You must learn to embrace me," the figure said. "Understand that I am not your enemy. I am a part of your journey, a lesson to be learned." As the figure spoke, I felt a shift in my perspective. The shadows were not just darkness, they were lessons that had shaped me. I could acknowledge them without letting them control my life. "I see now," I said slowly, the weight of understanding settling in my chest. "I can learn from you. You don't have to haunt me." With that realization, the figure began to dissolve, and the room filled with light. I felt a surge of hope, a sense of empowerment that surged through my veins. I had faced the darkness, and instead of succumbing to it, I had found a way to transform it into something meaningful. When I opened my eyes, the room felt brighter, the shadows no longer looming but rather gently fading into the background. I stood up, a sense of purpose driving me forward. I would no longer let fear dictate my actions. As I moved to the trash can, I retrieved the sock and held it up, a symbol of my journey. It was a reminder that while the past may linger, it did not have to define my future. I took a deep breath, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. And in that moment, I knew I was stronger than ever before. The echoes of the past would always be with me, but they would no longer hold me captive. I was ready to step into the light, to forge a new path filled with courage and resilience. With renewed determination, I tossed the sock out once more, knowing that this time it would not return. I closed my eyes and smiled, embracing the promise of a new beginning. But deep within, a part of me wondered if the darkness would return again. I couldn't shake the feeling that my journey was far from over, but I felt equipped to face whatever challenges lay ahead. And with that thought, I stepped into a new day, ready to embrace the unknown. The days following that night were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt lighter, more empowered. I had learned to embrace my fears rather than run from them. But the shadows still lurked, a constant reminder that my journey wasn't finished. As I moved through my daily life, I found myself questioning the very nature of fear. Why did it linger? What was it trying to teach me? Each time I faced a challenge, I reminded myself of the lessons I had learned. I no longer viewed my fears as enemies, but rather as aspects of myself that needed understanding and compassion. Yet, as the weeks passed, I began to sense a change. The shadows grew bolder, creeping closer, their presence becoming more palpable. I would wake in the middle of the night, feeling an inexplicable weight on my chest, as if the darkness were testing my resolve. Then, one fateful evening, it happened. I was sitting on the couch, engrossed in a book, when I heard a soft rustling sound from the hallway. My heart raced, and instinctively, I turned toward the source of the noise. It was a sound I had grown all too familiar with, the sound of fabric sliding against the floor. I stood up slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. There, just outside my bedroom door, lay a pair of socks, one blue, one green. They were identical to the ones that had haunted me before, the symbols of my struggle. I felt a rush of adrenaline surge through me as panic clawed at my throat. No! I shouted, the word echoing in the stillness of the night. You can't come back. I've faced you. But the silence that followed felt heavy, as if the air itself was thick with anticipation. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. I had confronted my fears before, I could do it again. This time, I wouldn't let panic take over. I would stand my ground. As I approached the socks, I felt the familiar chill wash over me, but I pushed back against it. What do you want? I demanded, my voice steady despite the tremor beneath the surface. The figure began to materialize from the shadows, its form flickering in and out like a candle in the wind. You have tried to escape me, it said, its voice low and resonant. But I am not just a figment of your imagination. I am the culmination of your fears, your doubts, and your past. You cannot erase me. I don't want to erase you, I replied, my heart pounding. I want to understand you. I want to learn from you. The figure paused, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of something almost human in its darkened face. You cannot learn if you refuse to face the truth of who you are, it said. You must confront the deepest fears that lie within you. As it spoke, images flooded my mind, moments of vulnerability, pain, and isolation. I felt the weight of my past pressing down on me, suffocating and relentless. What if I can't face them? I asked, my voice shaking. Then you will remain trapped, it replied, its voice almost sympathetic. You have the power to break free, but you must be willing to confront the darkest parts of yourself. In that moment, I felt a wave of clarity wash over me. I realized that this was not just about the socks or the figure, It was about embracing every part of who I was, my strengths and my weaknesses. I had been so focused on overcoming fear that I had neglected to fully understand it. I choose to face you, I declared, feeling a sense of determination rise within me. I will not let you control my life anymore. I accept you as part of my journey. As the words left my lips, the figure seemed to shimmer, its form shifting in response to my acceptance. Then let us begin, it said, a hint of warmth in its voice. Suddenly, the shadows surged forward, enveloping me in darkness. I felt myself being pulled into a whirlwind of memories, moments that had shaped my fears. I was thrown into my past, facing each memory head on. I saw myself as a child, alone on the playground, the sting of loneliness palpable. I faced the rejection I felt when friends chose others over me. I confronted the feelings of inadequacy that arose when I didn't meet expectations. Each memory played out like a haunting melody, but this time, instead of feeling overwhelmed, I stood firm. I see you, I whispered to each memory, embracing it. You do not define me, but you have shaped me. I will learn from you. With each acknowledgement, the shadows began to dissolve, the darkness lightening. The figure transformed as well, its form becoming less ominous and more like a guide. You are stronger than you know, it said, its voice now filled with encouragement. Embrace your past, and you will find your power. As I continued to confront each moment, I felt a warmth spreading through me. I had always believed that acknowledging my fears would weaken me, but instead, it made me feel whole. I understood that every experience had contributed to my resilience. Finally, the last memory faded, and I found myself back in my living room, the figure standing before me, transformed into a soft glow. You have faced the darkness within, it said, pride evident in its tone. You are ready to step into the light. With that, the figure began to dissolve, leaving behind a sense of peace that washed over me like a gentle breeze. The socks that had once represented my fears lay quietly on the floor, but now they felt different, no longer symbols of dread, but reminders of my journey towards self-acceptance. I knelt down and picked up the socks, feeling their fabric once more. Instead of fear, I felt gratitude for the lessons they had taught me. I smiled, a sense of joy and clarity filling my heart. As I tossed them into the trash for the final time, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I knew that while the shadows might linger, I had the strength to face them. I was not defined by my fears. I was shaped by my ability to confront them. With newfound determination, I stepped into the light of a new day, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer held power over my future. I was free. And as I closed my eyes that night, I felt a sense of peace enveloping me, knowing that I had finally confronted my fears, and in doing so, had discovered the strength I had always possessed. Have you ever heard music coming from nowhere? That was the first thought that crossed my mind when I sat down on my couch one quiet evening. The world outside my window was dark and still, and I was ready to lose myself in the familiar comfort of my favorite songs. But just as I was about to press play, a melody drifted down from the ceiling, breaking the silence like a fragile glass shattering against concrete. It was soft at first, an almost haunting tune that resonated through the floorboards, sending a chill up my spine. I leaned back, trying to shake off the initial wave of unease. My upstairs neighbors were away for the weekend, and I was certain that the apartment above mine was empty. So where was the music coming from? I stood up and approached the ceiling, pressing my ear against it. The melody seemed to twist and turn, flowing like water over rocks, familiar yet unsettling. It felt personal, as if it was playing just for me. The notes danced around in my mind, beckoning me closer, wrapping me in their strange embrace. At first, I found it beautiful. The kind of melody that could evoke long-forgotten memories or buried emotions. But then, as I listened more closely, I noticed something odd about it. The harmony was slightly off, like a song played in a different key, and I could hear subtle undertones that sent a shiver through me. It was as if the music was trying to communicate something I couldn't quite grasp. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself. "It's just music." But deep down, I could feel the creeping sensation of dread. I stepped back, trying to convince myself that it was nothing. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I went back to the couch, attempting to focus on a book I had left open. But the music continued, each note tugging at my attention. It seemed to grow louder, morphing into something more complex. I could almost distinguish individual instruments, soft strings weaving through the air, a piano playing an eerie counterpoint. It was as if an unseen composer was crafting a score just for me, and I was both mesmerized and terrified. After a while, the music shifted. What had once been a soothing lull transformed into a chaotic symphony of dissonance, like a storm brewing just above my head. My heart raced, and I gripped the armrests of the couch, anxiety coursing through me. I felt as if the melody was pulling me in, urging me to listen, to engage, but I was too frightened to give in. Suddenly, I heard a faint thud. The music cut off abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence. My breath caught in my throat as I glanced at the ceiling, half expecting something to burst through. I stood frozen, the quiet stretching into something unbearable. Then, just as quickly, the music returned. This time it was louder and more frantic, as if the unseen musician was pouring their heart into the notes. It echoed in my mind, weaving a tapestry of emotions, fear, sorrow, and an undeniable sense of longing. I felt an impulse to move closer to it, to discover its source, yet dread kept me rooted to the spot. Why am I so scared? I asked myself, trying to shake off the irrationality of it all. I was alone in my apartment, a place I had always felt safe. But tonight, that safety felt fragile, like glass on the brink of shattering. The music was no longer a pleasant distraction, it felt like an invasion. Just then, a new sound emerged, a low, throbbing bass that reverberated through the floor. It seemed to synchronize with my heartbeat, a pulsating rhythm that felt almost alive. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. Was it possible someone was playing tricks on me? But who would go to such lengths? With a surge of courage, I grabbed my phone and called my upstairs neighbors. The phone rang, but there was no answer. Panic clawed at me, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. It was late, but surely they would pick up. I needed someone to reassure me that this was all a mistake, that there was a logical explanation for the music echoing above. After a few moments, I hung up, frustration mingling with fear. The music continued, now taking on a sinister quality. I could almost hear whispers buried within the melody, secret messages meant only for me. The thought sent chills down my spine. Was I losing my mind? I glanced around the room, the shadows shifting as the light from my lamp flickered. The atmosphere felt charged, as if something unseen was watching me. I could almost hear my own thoughts echoing back at me, a cacophony of anxieties swirling in my mind. The music escalated again, each note striking like a hammer against my resolve. I took a deep breath and forced myself to step toward the center of the room. "This is ridiculous," I whispered to myself. "It's just music." But as the notes crescendoed, I could feel a growing sense of inevitability, as if something beyond my understanding was unfolding. I had to know what was happening. I had to confront the source of this melody that had woven itself into my very being. With trembling hands, I reached for the doorknob. I would go upstairs, confront my neighbors, and find out what was happening. The music became a relentless pulse in my ears, urging me onward. It felt like an invitation, and despite my fear, I couldn't resist. As I opened the door, the music reached a fever pitch, and for the first time, I wondered what awaited me in the shadows above. Was I stepping into a world of sound, or was I about to unravel something far darker than I could imagine? I hesitated at the threshold, the chill of the hallway wrapping around me like a shroud. The music pulsed above, almost tangible, inviting me to step into its chaotic embrace. My heart raced, a frantic drumbeat echoing the discordant symphony that filled the air. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The stairs creaked under my weight as I ascended. Each step felt like a descent into a strange and foreboding realm. The melody transformed, shifting to an eerie, lullaby-like tune that seemed to mock my anxiety. I paused on the second floor, peering up at the door of my neighbor's apartment, which stood ominously closed. The music spilled from above, and I felt an urge to knock, to demand answers. But fear gripped me. What if no one was there? What if the music was not of this world, but a manifestation of something more sinister? My mind raced with possibilities, but I could not turn back now. The melody had woven itself into my consciousness, and I was compelled to discover its origin. I raised my fist and rapped gently on the door. The sound of my knuckles against the wood felt feeble in the face of the swelling music above. I held my breath, waiting for a response, but the silence that followed was deafening. My pulse quickened as I considered that I might be utterly alone in this bizarre scenario. Just as I turned to leave, the door creaked open, revealing a darkened hallway. A figure stood silhouetted against the light spilling from within, their features obscured. "You heard it too, didn't you?" the figure said, their voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, confusion and curiosity battling within me. What is happening? Where is the music coming from? The figure stepped forward, and I recognized them as my neighbor, a woman with whom I had exchanged pleasantries but never really known. "It's complicated," she replied, her eyes darting nervously to the floor. "You shouldn't be here." Before I could respond, she turned and beckoned me inside. The room was dimly lit, filled with strange artifacts that lined the walls, musical instruments of various shapes and sizes, some I had never seen before. The air felt electric, charged with an energy that both thrilled and terrified me. "I thought you were out of town," I said, looking around. "What's all this?" She waved her hand dismissively. "That's not important. What matters is the music. It's not just a melody, it's a call." "What do you mean?" I asked, stepping further inside, my curiosity piqued despite the unease gnawing at my insides. "The music is a bridge," she explained, her voice low and urgent. "It connects us to other realms. I've been experimenting, trying to understand its power. But it's attracted something that I can't control." A shiver ran down my spine. "What do you mean by something?" Just then, the music shifted again, rising in intensity. It swelled into a cacophony of sound, swirling around us like a storm. The walls trembled, and I could feel the vibrations in my chest. I glanced at the neighbor, her face pale with fear. "We have to stop it," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "It's too late to turn back." "Stop what?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. The music is feeding off our emotions, our fears, she replied. It's trying to manifest something that doesn't belong in our world. We need to silence it before it breaks through. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the strange artifacts around us vibrating in resonance with the chaotic melody. My breath quickened. How do we do that? She grabbed a small, ornate flute from a nearby shelf and handed it to me. You have to play, she urged. You must counter the music. Channel your emotions into the notes. Only then can we disrupt the connection. I stared at the flute, its intricate designs almost mesmerizing. What if I can't? I stammered. You have to, she insisted, her eyes wide with desperation. You are the only one who can. You can feel the music, can't you? You have to find the harmony within yourself and use it against the chaos. As the music swelled above us, the room felt like it was closing in. I took the flute, my hands trembling. The pressure mounted, and I realized I had no choice. I could either let the music consume me or confront it head on. I lifted the flute to my lips, feeling the coolness of the metal against my skin. The notes came to me in a flash, memories of melodies I had loved flooding my mind. I closed my eyes, focusing on the chaotic symphony above, and began to play. At first, the notes wavered, struggling to find their place amidst the chaos. But slowly, I found my rhythm, pouring my emotions into each breath. The sound flowed from me, intertwining with the eerie music from above. I felt as if I were crafting a spell, each note a thread connecting me to the world I inhabited and the unseen one I was fighting against. As I played, the energy shifted. The chaotic melody began to falter, the dissonance fading in the face of my harmony. I could feel the figure beside me watching, her breath held in suspense. The shadows in the corners of the room twisted and writhed, but I pressed on, determined to banish the darkness that had crept into my life. But then, just as I thought I was gaining control, a sudden, chilling silence enveloped us. The music above vanished, leaving a heavy stillness that felt oppressive. My heart sank as I opened my eyes, the flute falling from my lips. What happened? I gasped, panic rising once more. I don't know, my neighbor replied, her voice trembling. It shouldn't have stopped. It's not over yet. And just like that, the music began again, but this time it was different, distorted and warped, as if the very fabric of reality was unraveling. I could feel it clawing at the edges of my mind, beckoning me to surrender. I looked at my neighbor, dread pooling in my stomach. What do we do now? But before she could answer, the air crackled with energy, and a dark figure began to materialize before us, its form an amalgamation of shadows and sound. It loomed larger, a grotesque distortion of everything we had tried to confront. We're not done yet, it hissed, its voice a chilling symphony of despair. And in that moment, I realized that our fight had only just begun. The dark figure loomed before us, an unsettling amalgamation of sound and shadow, pulsing with the remnants of the chaotic melody. I felt my heart race as the air grew thick with tension. The walls of the apartment, once familiar and safe, now felt like they were closing in around us, trapping us in a nightmare we couldn't escape. What is it? I whispered, my voice trembling. It's what we summoned, my neighbor said, her eyes wide with terror. An echo of our fears, our doubts. The music was a bridge, and now it's come to collect. I glanced at the grotesque figure, feeling its presence seep into my mind, a cold chill that made my skin crawl. It writhed and twisted, its shape ever-changing, as if it were feeding off our panic. The air vibrated with a low hum, a discordant symphony that resonated deep within me. We have to stand together, my neighbor urged, her voice firm despite her fear. If we let it divide us, it will consume us. I nodded, trying to gather my resolve. The darkness emanating from the figure felt like a weight pressing down on my chest, but I refused to succumb to its influence. I picked up the flute again, feeling its cool surface beneath my fingers, and took a deep breath. We need to find a way to push it back, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What if we play together? She hesitated, her eyes flickering between the dark figure and the flute. Can you do it? She asked. Can you summon the harmony again? I nodded, though self-doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. We have to try. As the figure lurched toward us, I raised the flute to my lips and began to play, channeling every ounce of emotion I could muster. The notes poured forth, filling the air with a melody of defiance. My neighbor quickly joined in, her voice harmonizing with mine. Together, we wove a tapestry of sound that pushed against the encroaching darkness. The figure recoiled, twisting away from the combined force of our music. It hissed, a cacophony of whispers and cries that filled the room with a sense of dread. The shadows flickered, swirling around us like a tempest, but we pressed on, pouring our fear and determination into the melody. Don't stop, my neighbor shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. We have to hold it back. With every note, I felt the music take shape, transforming into a barrier that pushed against the dark figure. It howled in frustration, its form flickering as if it were struggling against the harmony we had created. I could see its true face, twisted, contorted, a reflection of every fear I had ever buried deep inside me. As we played, memories flashed through my mind, moments of doubt, despair, and loneliness. I fought to weave them into the music, channeling that pain into something powerful. Each note became a reminder of my strength, a refusal to let fear control me. The shadows in the room danced wildly, and the figure's form began to fragment, splitting into smaller, darker tendrils that lashed out in desperation. I felt a cold gust of wind sweep through the room, and for a moment, the music faltered. My heart raced as I glanced at my neighbor, who looked equally frightened but determined. Focus, she urged, her voice cutting through the chaos. We can do this. I took a deep breath and plunged back into the melody, reinforcing the notes with every ounce of willpower I could summon. The darkness responded, swirling around us like a storm, but we were not backing down. The haunting symphony we played grew louder, enveloping us in a cocoon of sound. As we reached the climax of our song, the dark figure let out a bone-chilling screech that echoed off the walls, rattling the very foundations of the apartment. The room trembled, and I felt a surge of energy rising within me, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold fear that had threatened to consume us. Now! I shouted, urging us both to give it everything we had. We pushed our music to its limits, pouring our souls into the melody, and as we did, the shadows around the figure began to dissipate. Keep going, my neighbor cried, her voice blending seamlessly with mine. The air around us shimmered with the power of our combined harmony, growing stronger and brighter with each passing moment. The figure writhed and screamed, its form collapsing under the force of our music. I could feel the darkness pulling at the edges of my consciousness, trying to pull me into despair, but I fought back with everything I had. The melody became a lifeline, connecting me to the strength I had buried within. And then, in a final surge, we struck the last note, a resounding chord that echoed through the apartment like thunder. The dark figure exploded into a cloud of shadows, dissipating into the air like smoke, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. The stillness was deafening, and I lowered the flute, breathless. My neighbor stood beside me, her face pale but triumphant. We did it, she whispered, disbelief evident in her voice. But as we took a moment to catch our breath, a chilling realization swept over me. The music had stopped, but the shadows remained. They lingered in the corners of the room, twisting and writhing, as if waiting for another opportunity to strike. "What now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The neighbor's expression darkened. "We may have pushed it back, but we haven't destroyed it. It's still here, lurking, waiting for the right moment to return." The weight of her words settled heavily in the air. The shadows, though diminished, were still present, a constant reminder of the darkness that could seep back into our lives at any moment. "We have to find a way to contain it," I said, determination rising within me. "There has to be a way to sever its connection to us." She nodded, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. "We can do this together. We just have to be strong." As we began to discuss our next steps, I couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was just beginning. The music that had drawn me into this world of shadows was a force I couldn't ignore. I felt it calling to me, a haunting melody that echoed in the depths of my mind. And I realized, with a growing sense of dread, that I would have to confront the shadows within myself before I could truly banish them from my life. Days passed, but the shadows lingered like an unwelcome guest, clinging to the edges of my mind and the corners of the apartment. The melody that had once resonated with power now felt like a haunting echo, taunting me with its absence. My neighbor, whose name I had finally learned was Eliza, became a constant presence as we worked together to understand the darkness that had seeped into our lives. Each night, we gathered in my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of our confrontation. We discussed the music, the shadows, and the figure that had threatened to consume us. It became clear that we needed to explore the connection between our emotions and the entity that had emerged from the music. "Maybe it's drawn to our fears," Eliza suggested one evening as we sat surrounded by candles. "It feeds off our insecurities, our doubts. We have to confront them if we want to sever its hold." I nodded, but the thought of delving into my fears was terrifying. What if confronting them only makes it stronger? "We won't know until we try," she replied, her voice steady. "We have to face what we've been avoiding. We need to reclaim our power." That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling as the shadows flickered against the walls, like dark tendrils searching for a way back in. I could feel their presence, creeping into my thoughts. Memories of past failures, moments of despair, and loneliness flooded my mind. Each one felt like a note in a discordant symphony, weaving together to create a haunting refrain that echoed through the silence. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within me. "What are you afraid of?" I whispered to myself. "What do you really fear?" The answer was a whisper in the back of my mind, a flicker of doubt that refused to be silenced. Failure. Isolation. Being alone in a world that didn't understand me. The very fears I had tried to bury now felt like shadows, clawing their way to the surface. The next day, Eliza and I agreed to meet again to share our fears openly. It was a step into the unknown, but I felt a strange sense of camaraderie as we prepared to face our demons. "Let's do it together," she said, her eyes determined. "We'll turn our fears into music. We can channel them and confront whatever darkness lingers." As the sun dipped below the horizon, we sat cross-legged in my living room, surrounded by the flickering candlelight. I held the flute, feeling its weight in my hands, a reminder of our shared struggle. The shadows danced in the corners, but I forced myself to focus on the task at hand. "What do you fear the most?" Eliza asked, her voice soft but firm. I hesitated, the weight of my vulnerability pressing down on me. Being alone, I finally admitted. I've always felt like I didn't belong, like I was an outsider, and that no one truly understood me. Eliza nodded, her expression empathetic. I understand that fear. I've felt it too. It's like being trapped in a glass box, watching the world move around you while you remain stuck. Exactly, I replied, relief flooding through me. And it feels like the shadows are waiting for me to falter, to give into that isolation. We can't let them win, she said. Let's turn that fear into music. Let's play it out together. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in the air. The shadows seemed to swirl more violently, as if anticipating our confrontation. I lifted the flute to my lips, playing a hesitant note that resonated in the silence. Eliza joined in, her voice weaving around mine, creating a haunting harmony. As we played, I poured every ounce of my fear and isolation into the music. The notes became raw and emotional, echoing the emptiness I had often felt. Each sound filled the room, reverberating off the walls as we transformed our pain into something tangible. The shadows writhed, and I could feel the darkness pulling at me, but I refused to back down. I focused on the melody, letting the fear guide my notes, shaping it into a song of defiance. Eliza's voice rose alongside mine, creating a powerful tapestry of sound that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. With each note, I felt the shadows begin to recede. The music transformed into a beacon of light, a reminder that I was not alone. I could hear Eliza's voice, strong and unwavering, echoing my sentiments and reinforcing my resolve. But just as we reached the crescendo of our song, the dark figure reemerged, a swirling mass of shadows and sound that threatened to engulf us once more. It howled in anger, the cacophony overwhelming our melody, and I felt my heart race. Keep playing, Eliza shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Don't stop. We pressed on, determined to confront the darkness that sought to consume us. The music swelled, a powerful force pushing against the figure. The shadows thrashed, twisting and contorting in a desperate attempt to regain control. As we played, I realized that our music was not just a defense, it was a declaration of our existence, a reminder that we would not be silenced. The shadows shrank away, retreating from the power of our combined melody. But just as victory seemed within reach, the figure unleashed a piercing scream that shattered the air, sending waves of despair crashing over us. I felt the darkness clawing at my mind, trying to drag me back into the depths of my fears. Focus, Eliza cried, her voice breaking through the chaos. Remember why we're doing this. In that moment, I recalled the faces of friends, the laughter, the moments of connection that had once filled my life with joy. I drew strength from those memories, channeling them into the music. With renewed vigor, I played, my notes weaving together a tapestry of resilience. The shadows writhed in agony, their form beginning to destabilize as our melody pushed against them. I could feel the darkness pulling at my consciousness, but I fought back, pouring every ounce of hope into the music. The figure let out another anguished wail, and as I played with all my might, it began to unravel, disintegrating into a cloud of smoke and echoes. The air crackled with energy as the darkness retreated, leaving behind a stillness that was both eerie and liberating. Finally, with one last note, the shadows dissipated completely, leaving us in a hushed silence. I lowered the flute, breathless and shaken, my heart racing with the remnants of our battle. Eliza looked at me, a mixture of relief and exhaustion in her eyes. We did it, she said, her voice trembling. But as the silence enveloped us, a new fear settled in the pit of my stomach. The shadows may have retreated, but the battle had exposed something deeper, an understanding that the darkness within was as real as the shadows we had faced. What if it comes back? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Eliza took a deep breath, her expression contemplative. It may come back, but we've learned how to confront it. We can face our fears together. And in that moment, I realized that the true struggle was not just against the darkness outside, but against the shadows within myself. The music had become a powerful ally, but it was our connection, our willingness to confront our vulnerabilities, that would truly protect us from the darkness that threatened to return. With renewed determination, I looked at Eliza. Let's keep playing. We need to prepare for whatever comes next. Together, we would face the shadows, both outside and within. The days that followed felt like a fragile truce between light and darkness. Eliza and I dedicated ourselves to practicing our music, exploring the depths of our emotions through sound. Each session became a cathartic release, a way to confront the shadows that lingered just beyond our reach. But the unease remained. The air felt charged with unspoken fears, and the shadows, though diminished, still flickered at the edges of my perception. I could sense them lurking, waiting for a moment of weakness, a crack in our resolve. One evening, as we played in my living room, a haunting melody emerged, a tune that felt both familiar and foreign. I closed my eyes, letting the notes wash over me, and for a fleeting moment, I felt as if the music was guiding me somewhere, revealing hidden truths. Eliza, I said, breaking the silence as the last note faded. Do you ever feel like the music is trying to tell us something? She nodded slowly, her brow furrowing in thought. It's like it's a part of us, reflecting our innermost fears and desires. Maybe it's a way for us to understand what we've been avoiding. What if we let it guide us? I suggested, a mixture of excitement and trepidation coursing through me. What if we explore what the music is revealing? Eliza considered my words, her expression shifting from uncertainty to determination. Let's do it. But we need to be careful. The shadows could still be listening. That night, we gathered again, the candles flickering as we prepared to delve deeper into the melody that had captured my thoughts. I picked up the flute, feeling its familiar weight in my hands, and Eliza took a deep breath, readying her voice. Together, we played, allowing the music to flow freely, unrestrained by our conscious thoughts. As the notes danced in the air, I closed my eyes and surrendered to the rhythm, feeling the melody pull me in. It felt as if we were entering a different realm, a place where the boundaries between reality and the unknown blurred. The shadows flickered more intensely, casting elongated shapes on the walls, but I pushed through the unease, letting the music guide me. With each note, fragments of memories surfaced, moments of joy, pain, and confusion. I could hear the echoes of laughter, the sting of loneliness, and the warmth of connection. The melody wove them together, creating a tapestry of emotions that felt almost tangible. Suddenly, a dissonance pierced through our harmonious flow, a sharp note that shattered the moment. I opened my eyes to find the dark figure looming once more, more defined than before, as if it had been waiting for this very opportunity. No! Eliza shouted, her voice filled with urgency. We can't let it take control. But the figure surged forward, a wave of darkness that threatened to drown us. It howled, a cacophony of our fears echoing in the air, and I felt my heart race as panic threatened to take hold. Focus on the music, I cried, raising the flute to my lips. We can't let it drown us out. We played with all our might, pouring our emotions into the melody, but the figure pressed closer, feeding off our fear. I could feel it gnawing at the edges of my mind, dragging me back into despair. Remember what we're fighting for. Eliza shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. We are not alone. In that moment, I drew strength from her words. I channeled my fear into the music, transforming it into a powerful force of defiance. The shadows recoiled slightly, but the figure was relentless, lashing out with a fury that threatened to overwhelm us. Don't give in, I urged, pushing the melody higher, weaving our shared strength into a tapestry of sound. The air crackled with energy as our notes swirled together, creating a shield against the encroaching darkness. But then I remembered the moments I had hidden away, the times I had felt unworthy, disconnected, and unseen. The music shifted, revealing a melody that resonated with those buried fears, drawing the figure in like a moth to a flame. No! I gasped, realizing what I was doing. I can't let it feed on this. But it was too late. The figure surged forward, absorbing the very essence of my pain, growing stronger as it wrapped itself around me. The music faltered, the harmony breaking into discord. Stay with me, Eliza cried, her voice trembling. We can't let it take you. In a desperate attempt, I closed my eyes and focused on the light within me, the flicker of hope that had guided me through my darkest moments. I drew from the joy I had once known, the laughter and love that had filled my heart. Play with me, I shouted, the urgency in my voice cutting through the chaos. We have to reclaim the music. Eliza responded immediately, her voice rising above the darkness as she joined me in a powerful refrain. Together, we unleashed a melody that surged with our combined strength, a triumphant declaration of who we were. The figure screamed, its form flickering as it struggled against the tide of our music. The shadows shrank back, twisting and curling like smoke as our melody pushed against them. I could feel the darkness weakening, unraveling at the seams as we played with everything we had. And then, in a final surge of energy, we struck the last chord, a resounding note that echoed throughout the apartment, shaking the very foundations of our fears. The dark figure writhed in agony, its form collapsing as it exploded into a cloud of shadows, dissipating into the air. The silence that followed was deafening, and I lowered the flute, gasping for breath. The shadows had retreated, but I knew they were still lurking, waiting for another opportunity. Eliza looked at me, her eyes wide with a mix of relief and concern. We did it, she said, her voice trembling. But at what cost? I don't know, I replied, feeling the weight of the battle pressing down on me. But I know we can't let our fears take control again. We have to remain vigilant. As we sat in the aftermath of our confrontation, I realized that the shadows might never truly vanish. They were a part of me, a reminder of my struggles and insecurities. But I also knew that I had the power to confront them, to turn my fears into music and transform them into something beautiful. The journey ahead would not be easy, but I was no longer alone. With Eliza by my side, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Together, we would face the darkness, one note at a time. Have you ever heard a heartbeat coming from a wall? I hadn't until it started echoing through my room, deep and rhythmic, like a ghost whispering secrets. At first, I dismissed it as the old pipes settling or the creaks of the house. But as the nights wore on, the sound grew louder, more insistent, like a heartbeat trying to break free. I had recently moved into this old house, seeking solitude after a messy breakup. The walls were thick and worn, filled with the memories of those who had lived there before. Yet, now it felt like those memories were alive, trapped beneath the surface, pulsing with a life of their own. The first night I heard it, I had just settled into bed, exhausted from unpacking and organizing. I closed my eyes, hoping for sleep to take me, Instead, I was met with a soft thump, thump, thump reverberating through the walls. It seemed to synchronize with my own heart, a strange and unsettling reminder of my solitude. I pulled the covers tighter around me, willing myself to ignore it. It could be the wind, I thought. Or perhaps my imagination was playing tricks on me in the stillness of the night. But the sound persisted, louder now, a relentless drumming that invaded my thoughts and pushed sleep further away. Just a house settling, I murmured to myself, though I could feel my heartbeat quicken, matching the rhythm of that eerie sound. The air grew heavy, thick with an unshakable tension. I forced myself to breathe deeply, to concentrate on anything but that insistent thump. The following nights, the heartbeat became a fixture in my routine. It thudded softly at first, gradually growing louder, and I found myself lying awake, wide-eyed and anxious. It felt like a countdown, each beat a reminder that something was wrong, something I could not understand. It was both fascinating and terrifying, a siren song that both beckoned and warned. I started to notice other things. The shadows in my room seemed to flicker more in the corners of my vision, dark figures that danced just out of reach. Every time I turned to look, they would vanish, leaving me with nothing but the echo of that heartbeat and the whisper of my own fears. One night, unable to bear it any longer, I got out of bed. I crept toward the wall from which the sound originated, my heart racing with each step. The hallway was dimly lit, and I could see the faded wallpaper peeling away, as if it were trying to escape its own past. As I pressed my ear against the wall, the heartbeat intensified, resonating through my bones. It was almost as if it were speaking to me, begging me to listen, to understand. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me, trying to drown out the panic rising within. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice trembling in the quiet. But there was no reply, only the steady rhythm that pulsed in time with my own fear. I felt the chill of the night creeping around me, wrapping me in its cold embrace. Returning to bed, I pulled the covers over my head, trying to block out the sound, but it only seemed to grow stronger. Sleep eluded me, leaving me trapped in a world of uncertainty and dread. What could be causing it? Was it the house, or something deeper, something within me? The heartbeat continued to throb, becoming a haunting lullaby that accompanied my sleepless nights. I was drawn to it, yet terrified of what it might reveal. Each thump felt like an invitation, a beckoning into the darkness that lay beyond the wall. I was caught in a dance with the unknown, and I couldn't tell if I was leading or being led. I knew I needed to find out what lay behind that sound, what secrets the wall held. But as I lay there, heart racing and mind racing faster, I wondered, was it wise to seek the truth, or would it only lead me deeper into despair? The answer lurked just beyond my reach, hidden in the shadows of my own mind, waiting for me to make my move. The next morning, I awoke to silence. The absence of the heartbeat felt more unsettling than its presence. I glanced at the wall, half expecting to hear that familiar thumping again, but nothing came. I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of the night's unease. Over breakfast, I tried to focus on mundane things, the toast popping up, the steam rising from my coffee. Yet, the haunting memory of the heartbeat lingered, wrapped around my thoughts like a vine. I decided to investigate, to uncover what lay behind the wall, hoping to dispel the mystery that was now consuming me. Armed with a flashlight and a hammer, I approached the wall with trepidation. The wallpaper was faded, and the paint had chipped away, revealing the bare wood underneath. My heart raced as I traced my fingers along the surface, searching for any signs of disturbance. I found nothing, just an ordinary wall, as if the heartbeat had been a figment of my imagination. But deep down, I knew it was real. With a deep breath, I took a step back and raised the hammer. The sound of metal against wood echoed in the quiet room, each blow sending a shiver down my spine. As I struck, I felt the vibrations resonate through my body, mirroring the rhythm I had heard. I paused, listening. Nothing. Just the silence of the house, mocking me. After a few strikes, a small hole appeared. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. What would I find? As I pried away the remaining plaster, a thin layer of dust fell to the ground, revealing a dark cavity beyond. I held the flashlight up to the hole, peering inside. At first, it was just darkness, but then I noticed something glimmering in the faint light. A piece of metal, old and rusted, caught my eye. I reached in, my fingers brushing against something cold and smooth. Suddenly, a chilling draft swept through the room, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. It felt as though something was watching me, lurking just out of sight. I pulled my hand back, heart racing, and took a step back from the wall. "Stop it," I whispered to myself. "It's just a wall." But the unease lingered. I spent the rest of the day trying to distract myself, throwing myself into tasks around the house. Yet, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, made me jump. I was on edge, a raw nerve exposed to the world. That night, as I lay in bed, the heartbeat returned, pounding steadily behind the wall. It was louder now, more insistent, as if it were demanding my attention. I tried to ignore it, focusing on my breathing, but it was impossible. The sound thumped in my ears, pulling me deeper into a whirlpool of dread. Then, I heard a whisper. It was soft, barely audible, but it sent a jolt of fear through me. "Help me," it said. I shot upright, heart racing, scanning the dark corners of my room. Was it real? Or just a trick of my mind, fueled by the stress and exhaustion of the past few days? "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling. Silence answered, but the heartbeat grew louder, echoing like a drum in the night. I couldn't take it anymore. I stumbled out of bed, clutching the flashlight tightly. The wall loomed before me, dark and foreboding. I pressed my ear against it again, straining to hear. "Help me," the whisper came again, more urgent this time. It felt as if it was coming from within the wall itself. I recoiled, fear washing over me. What was happening? Was this really just my imagination? Or was there something trapped inside the walls of my home, something that needed help? I took a step back, wrestling with the urge to flee. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was tied to whatever was happening, that I needed to confront it. With shaky hands, I returned to the hole I had created earlier, heart pounding louder than the sound behind me. "Okay," I breathed, steeling myself. "Let's find out what's going on." I started to widen the hole, adrenaline coursing through me as the darkness loomed closer. As I pulled away the last remnants of plaster, the heartbeat throbbed louder, filling the air with a deafening intensity. My breath quickened. I was about to uncover a secret, but at what cost? As the last bits of plaster crumbled away, I held my breath, heart pounding like a wild drum. The hole widened, and I peered deeper into the darkness. The flashlight beam sliced through the shadows, revealing a narrow cavity lined with old, damp wood. My pulse quickened as I spotted what looked like a tattered piece of fabric caught on a protruding nail. "Help me," the whisper came again, clearer now, and I felt an icy grip around my heart. I was not imagining this. Whatever was in the wall was real, and it needed me. With shaky hands, I reached in, fingers brushing against the rough wood. I pulled out the fabric, a small, frayed scrap of cloth that felt strangely warm against my skin. As I held it up, the flashlight illuminated something else, a wooden box, partially hidden in the shadows. Curiosity gnawed at me, mixing with fear. What was in the box? I had to know. I carefully maneuvered my hand deeper into the cavity, feeling the cold, smooth surface of the box. It was surprisingly light, and I could feel something shifting inside it as I pulled it free. I stumbled back, holding the box in my hands. It was unadorned, its surface marred by age and neglect, but it felt alive. The heartbeat behind the wall pulsed in rhythm with my own. I could almost sense a connection, as if the box and the sound were somehow intertwined. Open it, the whisper urged again, more forceful now. My fingers trembled as I fumbled with the latch, finally prying it open. The box creaked like a voice emerging from a long slumber. Inside lay a small, heart-shaped object made of a dark, glossy material that reflected the light like polished obsidian. I lifted it, my pulse racing as I felt an overwhelming sensation wash over me, an urge to hold it, to understand its significance. Take it, the voice whispered. It's the key. Key to what? I whispered back, but there was no answer, only the relentless thumping behind the wall. I stood frozen, the weight of the box heavy in my hands. The heartbeat thumped louder, reverberating through the air and into my bones. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the sensation that the box was connected to something far beyond my comprehension. Then, with sudden clarity, I remembered the stories I had heard about this house. Tales of a family that had once lived here, tragic and untold. Their shadows still lingered in the corners of my mind. Was this object somehow tied to them? Help me, the whisper echoed once more, a haunting plea that sent chills racing down my spine. Without thinking, I pressed the heart-shaped object to my chest, feeling its warmth seep into me. The moment I did, the heartbeat behind the wall stopped, replaced by a heavy silence. I felt a strange rush, as if the house itself had taken a deep breath. Then, the air shifted. The shadows in the room deepened, and a cold draft swept through, snuffing out the warmth I had felt just moments before. The atmosphere thickened, wrapping around me like a fog. Panic surged within me. Something was wrong. I stumbled back, dropping the box, which clattered to the floor. The heart-shaped object rolled away, its glow dimming. I could feel a presence, a weight in the room, an unearthly chill creeping in, tightening its grip around my throat. Why did you take it? The voice now sounded angry, distorted, echoing with a multitude of tones that made my skin crawl. You shouldn't have touched it. I gasped, heart racing. What do you want? I shouted into the darkness. Finish it, the voice commanded, and with that, the walls seemed to shudder. The heartbeat returned, this time more frantic, pounding against the confines of the space. I looked around, desperate for a way out. The room felt alive, the walls pressing in, shadows stretching, twisting into grotesque shapes. I felt trapped, suffocated by the weight of the house, the relentless whispering urging me forward. Finish what? I pleaded, backing away toward the door, my mind racing. But my feet felt rooted to the ground, as if the house itself was holding me captive. With a surge of determination, I scooped up the heart-shaped object in the box. I will finish it, I declared, my voice shaking but resolute. The heartbeat intensified, drowning out my own. I had to confront whatever this was. I had to understand what lay behind the wall, behind the whispers, behind the shadows. As I turned, ready to flee the room, the whisper transformed into a roar, echoing through the walls. You can't escape. You have to finish it. You have to face it. I stumbled out of the room, heart pounding, the shadows stretching after me, darkness clawing at my heels. I was running from something deep within the house, something that wanted to consume me. And I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. The hallway felt impossibly long as I sprinted, shadows flickering along the walls like specters watching my every move. The heart-shaped object throbbed in my pocket, a constant reminder of the pulse that had haunted me. Each step echoed with the weight of my fear and the relentless whispers growing louder, urging me to return, to finish what had begun. I burst through the door of the living room, panting, heart racing, and slammed it shut behind me. My mind raced with questions, but one nagged at me the most. What was this thing I had awakened? I glanced around, searching for something, anything, that could provide answers or protection. The room, filled with the warm hues of the setting sun, felt strangely serene compared to the chaos I had just fled. But as the shadows lengthened, the atmosphere shifted again, and I could feel the tension in the air tightening like a noose. "Face it," the voice whispered, now a cold caress on my neck. "You cannot hide from the truth. Show yourself." I shouted, the sound echoing in the silence. "What do you want from me?" In that moment, the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to coalesce, swirling together until they formed a figure, a dark silhouette that loomed larger than life. Its features were indistinct, a void that sucked in the light around it. "You must understand," the figure intoned, voice echoing as if it came from the very walls themselves. "You have invited me in. You sought to uncover the truth. I didn't ask for any of this," I retorted, fear giving way to anger. "I just wanted to live in peace." "Peace," it hissed, the sound reverberating in my bones. "You cannot find peace while hiding from your past. The heart holds the key." As the figure spoke, memories flooded my mind, fragments of dreams, faces I couldn't place, whispers that felt familiar yet foreign. The object in my pocket pulsed again, almost as if it were alive, urging me to listen. "What heart?" I asked, trying to ground myself amidst the rising tide of terror. "What do you mean?" "The heart that beats within these walls," the figure gestured toward the house. "It holds the echoes of your pain, your fears. To move forward, you must confront it." A chill ran down my spine. I took a step back, the weight of its words settling heavily on me. "Confront what?" This darkness?" "Yes," the figure said, its voice becoming softer, almost sympathetic. "You must remember." Suddenly, images began to flash before my eyes, memories of laughter and warmth, but also sorrow and regret. A family gathered around a table, a child's smile turning to tears, shadows creeping into the corners of my mind. Each image felt like a piece of a puzzle that I had long forgotten, buried deep beneath layers of denial. "No," I murmured, shaking my head as the memories overwhelmed me. "I don't want to remember." But the figure's presence intensified, the shadows swirling faster around us. "You cannot escape what you are. You must face it, or be consumed by it." With a deep breath, I summoned every ounce of courage. "Fine. Show me." The darkness enveloped me, and I was transported into a vision, images spinning around me like a whirlwind. I found myself standing in the very room I had fled, but it was different. Light flooded the space, and I could hear laughter, children playing, a family together. And then it shifted. The laughter turned to shouts, the light flickering as shadows encroached. I saw the faces, familiar yet haunting. There was a storm, anger, and betrayal. The walls felt alive, echoing with the pain of past choices. I stumbled back, gripping the heart-shaped object tightly. This is my family? Yes, the figure said, its voice now softer, more compassionate. Your heart is tied to theirs. Their pain, their memories, they are part of you. The images continued to swirl, revealing moments I had tried to forget, arguments, tears, the loss of love. Each revelation pierced my heart, and I felt the weight of grief crashing over me like a wave. Let it go, the figure urged. Release it. Only then can you be free. With a deep breath, I focused on the heart-shaped object in my hand. I closed my eyes, imagining all the pain, all the memories I had buried. I envisioned letting them flow out of me, allowing the shadows to take them. As I opened my eyes, the figure began to dissolve, the shadows receding. I felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. You are ready, it whispered, the sound echoing like a distant memory. I looked around the room, now bathed in light. The echoes of laughter returned, mingling with the fading darkness. I had confronted my past, and while it still lingered, it no longer held me captive. But just as I began to feel relief, a loud bang echoed from behind the walls, shaking the foundation of the house. My heart dropped. The heartbeat returned, louder than ever, and the walls seemed to tremble. What now? I asked, panic rising in my chest. Now you must protect your heart, the figure said, its voice fading into the shadows. Do not let it be consumed. With that, the room fell silent, leaving me standing alone, the heart-shaped object warm against my palm. I knew the fight wasn't over. I had confronted my past, but now I had to guard my future. And whatever lay ahead would test me in ways I could never imagine. The sound of the heartbeat grew more urgent, reverberating through the walls. I gripped the heart-shaped object tighter, feeling its warmth pulse against my skin. The shadows in the corners of the room writhed and twisted, as if they were alive, eager to consume me once again. I felt the weight of my past pressing down, urging me to flee, but I knew that running was no longer an option. I had faced my memories. Now I had to confront whatever entity sought to claim my heart. As I stepped toward the wall where the heartbeat seemed to echo strongest, I felt a shift in the air. The whispers returned, an ominous chorus rising around me. Finish it, they urged, a cacophony of voices merging into one. Show yourself. I shouted, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. I won't let you take me. The shadows surged forward, coiling around my legs like creeping vines. I stumbled but stood firm, pushing against the weight of the darkness. You will not take my heart, I declared, raising the heart-shaped object above my head. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled as if struck, and I felt a surge of energy coursing through me. The object pulsed in rhythm with my heartbeat, a beacon of light pushing back against the encroaching darkness. I closed my eyes, envisioning the warmth of my family, the love that had once filled this house. Your power lies within you, the figure whispered, now a soft presence beside me. Channel it. With a deep breath, I focused on that warmth, allowing it to spread through my body. I opened my eyes, and the room was ablaze with light, illuminating every corner. The shadows writhed, shrieking in protest as the light pushed them back. Be gone! I shouted, raising the heart-shaped object higher. You have no hold over me. The shadows screamed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. The walls shook, and I could feel the house tremble beneath my feet. But I held my ground, channeling the love and memories I had embraced. As the shadows dissolved, I felt a surge of clarity and strength. I am not afraid," I cried, and with that declaration, the darkness erupted, a wave of energy washing over the room. In an instant, the shadows evaporated, leaving only a soft glow in their wake. The heartbeat slowed, finally fading into silence. I stood in the center of the room, breathless but free. But as the dust settled, a quiet realization washed over me. The echoes of my past were not gone, they were woven into the very fabric of my being. I had faced my fears, but I would carry the weight of my memories with me always. And that was okay. As I stepped away from the wall, I felt lighter, unburdened yet changed. The heart-shaped object now rested gently in my palm, a reminder of the journey I had undertaken. I would hold on to it, not as a source of fear, but as a token of strength. The house was still, the shadows retreating into the corners, but I could feel a sense of peace enveloping the space. I had taken my stand, and now I could begin anew. The journey was far from over, but I was ready. The past would always be a part of me, but it would not define me. I smiled, feeling a warmth fill my chest. The heart within the walls now beat in harmony with my own. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you, even when you were completely alone? It's a strange sensation, one that can creep in quietly, like the shadows lengthening as the sun sets. For me, it started one late evening, deep in the heart of my cozy apartment, where the comforting hum of my computer was the only sound that filled the air. I was working on a project, the glow of the screen casting a soft light across the cluttered desk. Papers were strewn about, half-empty coffee mugs stood like sentinels, and my notes formed a chaotic landscape of ideas. I was engrossed, my mind racing through deadlines and details, when something caught my eye. One of the pens I always left on the left side of my keyboard had vanished. I could have sworn it was there just moments ago. At first, I brushed it off as my own forgetfulness. Maybe I had absent-mindedly moved it while searching for something else. I turned back to my work, but the sensation lingered, a nagging whisper at the back of my mind. The room felt unusually quiet, as if the walls were closing in. As the hours passed, I noticed other small changes. A stack of papers I had organized in neat piles seemed to have shifted slightly, the corner of one sheet peeking out as if someone had been rifling through my work. The coffee mug that had been on my right was now closer to the edge of the table, as if someone had nudged it in their haste. I shook my head, trying to dispel the feeling of unease. Surely, I was just tired. The late hour was playing tricks on my mind. But as I resumed my typing, I couldn't shake the growing sense of a presence nearby, a feeling that someone was hovering just outside the periphery of my vision. The next evening, the changes escalated. I arrived home from a brief errand, the day's fatigue weighing heavily on my shoulders. As I walked into my apartment, I noticed that the light on my desk had been turned off. I always left it on while I left the room, a habit that provided me with a sense of comfort. I flipped the switch back on, dismissing it as a power surge or some other mundane explanation. But then I saw it, a sticky note I had written earlier, now flipped over, facing the wrong way. The message was obscured, hidden from view. My heart raced as I turned it back, my mind racing with possibilities. Had I really turned it that way? I felt a chill crawl up my spine, my instincts screaming that something was wrong. That night, as I tried to work, I could hear the sounds of my own breath, loud and intrusive in the silence. Every creak of the floorboard seemed amplified, echoing in the stillness of the apartment. The sensation of being watched grew stronger, wrapping around me like a cold, damp blanket. I forced myself to focus, but my concentration shattered with each passing moment. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the kitchen, a sound so jarring that it made me jump. I dropped my pen and rushed toward the noise, my heart pounding. The kitchen was empty, but the metal dish rack had collapsed, its contents scattered across the floor. I stood frozen for a moment, adrenaline coursing through me. Was this just a coincidence, or was something more sinister at play? As I knelt to pick up the dishes, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. Shadows flickered at the edges of my vision, and I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there. But the room was still, silent and empty. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, but the unease settled deeper within me. That night, as I crawled into bed, the sound of my own breathing felt deafening. I pulled the covers tightly around me, hoping they would offer some semblance of protection. But sleep eluded me, the shadows creeping in like unwelcome guests, filling the dark corners of my mind with uncertainty. What was happening to me? Why did everything feel so off? I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, the product of late nights and stress. But deep down, I knew that something was wrong. Something was shifting in my home, and I was beginning to fear that I was not the only one inhabiting this space. The next few days unfolded like a nightmare on repeat. Each morning, I awoke with a sense of dread hanging over me, the shadows of the previous night clinging to my thoughts. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, but it only seemed to grow stronger, a gnawing presence at the back of my mind. My work became increasingly difficult to focus on. Every rustle of paper or creak of the floorboards set my heart racing. I started keeping a journal, writing down every strange occurrence, hoping to find a pattern or an explanation. But the list only grew longer, a testament to the escalating oddities. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, I noticed the knife block on the counter. I always kept the chef's knife in a specific spot, but now it was missing. I searched the kitchen, my anxiety mounting as I rifled through drawers and cabinets, but it was nowhere to be found. I felt a cold sweat bead at my temples. Had I misplaced it? Or was it another sign that someone, or something, was intruding into my space? Later that night, I decided to go to bed early, hoping that rest would provide a reprieve from the mounting tension. But as I lay in bed, the silence of my apartment felt oppressive. My mind raced, replaying the events of the past week. I could almost hear the whispers of doubt, as if the shadows were mocking me for being so naive. As I turned on my side, I caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of my eye. I sat up, my heart pounding, and scanned the room. The light from the street lamp outside cast eerie shapes on the wall, and for a brief moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing just beyond the threshold of my bedroom door. I blinked, and it was gone, just the shadows playing tricks on my mind. But the sensation lingered. I felt a chill race down my spine, as if something was holding its breath, waiting. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself it was merely my imagination. Yet, as I lay back down, I couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched. I pulled the covers tighter around me and closed my eyes, hoping for sleep. The following morning, I awoke to find my notebook on the floor, open to a page filled with frantic scribbles. I could have sworn I had placed it neatly on my desk before going to bed. My heart raced as I picked it up, flipping through the pages. The last entry, hastily written, read, "Am I losing my mind? Something is not right." I took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising panic. Maybe I was just forgetful. But as I sat down at my desk, I noticed a distinct change. The pictures on the wall, once a comforting reminder of happier times, now felt like eyes watching me. I could feel the weight of their gaze pressing down, as if they were witnesses to my unraveling. That afternoon, while trying to work, I heard a faint sound, a low hum that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. It was subtle at first, a distant melody that danced just beyond my comprehension. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, straining to listen. The sound grew louder, a haunting tune that sent shivers down my spine. "Is anyone there?" I called out, my voice wavering slightly. Silence responded, but the hum persisted, wrapping around me like a cold fog. I felt my skin crawl as I looked around, half expecting to see someone hiding just out of sight. But I was alone. Over the next few days, the disturbances escalated. Items continued to shift places, and the hum transformed into whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seeped into my thoughts. I began to question my sanity. Was I truly losing my grip on reality, or was there something else at play? In a desperate attempt to regain control, I decided to invite a friend over for dinner, hoping that the presence of someone else would provide a distraction from my spiraling thoughts. I called Jennifer, an old college friend, and she agreed to come over that Saturday. As I prepared for her visit, I cleaned the apartment, trying to restore a sense of normalcy. I forced myself to ignore the creeping dread that had become my constant companion. But when Jennifer arrived, I could sense her hesitation as she stepped inside. "Wow, it's cozy in here," she said, her eyes darting around the room. I forced a smile, but the unease settled between us like a heavy fog. As we chatted over dinner, I tried to keep the conversation light. But every creak of the floor or rustle of the curtains made me tense. I caught Jennifer glancing over her shoulder, as if she felt it too, the same sensation that had haunted me for weeks. "Are you okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "You seem a bit off." I took a breath, considering my words carefully. "I've just been a little stressed lately. Working from home can feel isolating sometimes." She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. "If you ever want to talk about it, I'm here." I appreciated her offer, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something more sinister was lurking just out of sight. As the night wore on, I felt the weight of the shadows pressing in around us. The whispers seemed to grow louder, filling the spaces between our words. When Jennifer left, I closed the door behind her, leaning against it as a wave of exhaustion washed over me. I could still feel the presence lingering in the air, a reminder that my home was no longer just mine. The shadows felt alive, and the whispers transformed into a chorus of doubts that echoed in my mind. I knew I had to confront whatever was happening, but how could I face the unseen? With every passing day, the line between reality and my own fears blurred, leaving me questioning everything I thought I knew. The days that followed Jennifer's visit were a blur of anxiety and paranoia. I found myself jumping at every sound, each creak of the floorboards sending a jolt of fear through me. I could no longer dismiss the changes around me as mere coincidence. Something was invading my space, my sanctuary, and I felt powerless to stop it. One evening, as I sat at my desk, I decided to confront the growing dread. I closed my laptop and took a deep breath, mentally preparing myself for whatever might come. I had to face the source of the disturbances head on. If it was a figment of my imagination, then I would expose it for what it was. If it was something real, I needed to understand what was happening. With resolve, I turned off the lights in my apartment, leaving only a single lamp on in the living room. The dim light cast long shadows across the walls, amplifying the eerie atmosphere. I positioned myself in a chair, facing the room, and closed my eyes. "If there's something here, show yourself," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Silence enveloped me, thick and heavy. I could hear my heartbeat echoing in my ears, each thought a reminder of my vulnerability. Moments stretched into eternity, and just as I began to doubt my decision, the whispers returned, soft, melodic, and just beyond comprehension. They swirled around me like a haunting lullaby, and I strained to listen, desperate to catch a clear word. "Who are you?" I whispered, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "What do you want?" The whispers grew louder, merging into a cacophony of sound that filled the room. I opened my eyes, the shadows shifting in the dim light. Shapes flickered just out of sight, and I could almost make out a form lingering in the corner. Panic gripped me, but I refused to look away. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the kitchen, breaking through the haze of whispers. I jumped to my feet, adrenaline surging through me as I raced toward the sound. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached the threshold of the kitchen, half expecting to see a figure standing there. But it was empty, save for a pile of pots and pans that had fallen from their places on the shelf. I stood frozen, breathing heavily, scanning the room for any signs of movement. The weight of the silence pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. As I began to pick up the scattered dishes, a flicker of movement caught my eye in the hallway. I turned, my breath catching in my throat. There, at the end of the corridor, I could see a shadow, a dark shape standing just beyond the light. It was humanoid but blurred at the edges, like a reflection in a disturbed pond. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. The figure didn't move, merely lingering at the edge of the light. I took a cautious step forward, but it faded into the darkness. The whispers returned, growing louder, drowning out my thoughts. It was as if the air itself had become charged with energy, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I was being beckoned, drawn toward the very darkness that frightened me. My instinct screamed to run, to escape, but something compelled me to move closer. I stepped into the hallway, the dim light flickering ominously. "What do you want?" I asked again, my voice quieter this time. "Why are you here?" For a moment, the whispers ceased. The silence was deafening, and I felt the weight of the unseen presence pressing in on me. I took another step forward, my heart racing as I reached the spot where the figure had stood. The air felt charged, thick with anticipation. And then, a cold breeze swept through the hallway, extinguishing the light. I gasped, plunging into darkness. My senses heightened. I could hear my own breath and the faint rustle of fabric in the stillness. I stumbled backward, panic clawing at my throat. Just then, the light flickered back on, illuminating the hallway. I froze. The shadow was gone, but in its place lay my chef's knife, the very one I had lost days ago, resting on the floor as if it had been carefully placed there. It gleamed ominously in the light, a chilling reminder of the presence I had been trying to confront. Fear surged through me as I picked it up, gripping the handle tightly. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being toyed with, that something was watching, waiting for me to falter. The atmosphere thickened, the whispers rising in a crescendo, swirling around me like a storm. With the knife clutched in my hand, I retreated to the living room, my mind racing. I needed to regain control, to assert my presence in this space. I placed the knife on the coffee table, a symbolic gesture of defiance. "I'm not afraid of you," I declared, my voice steady even as my heart raced. But as I spoke, the lights began to flicker. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through the walls. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, the room spinning slightly. The whispers transformed into a cacophony, an overwhelming chorus of sound that drowned out my thoughts. I stumbled backward, overwhelmed by the surge of energy. The The shadows seemed to pulse around me, growing thicker, swirling in chaotic patterns. "Stop it!" I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. "What do you want from me?" Suddenly, the room fell silent. The whispers ceased, and the light steadied. I stood there, breathless, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. It felt like an eerie calm had settled, but I knew better. This was just the eye of the storm. And then, a voice, soft yet resonant, pierced through the silence. "Help me." The words sent a chill down my spine. I froze, my heart racing again. "What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. "Who are you?" "I'm trapped," the voice continued, echoing in my mind. "You must help me." In that moment, I felt the weight of the presence shift. It was no longer an entity of fear, but a plea for assistance. My mind raced with questions. Who was this? What had happened to them? But as quickly as the clarity came, it vanished. The shadows began to swirl again, a chaotic dance that threatened to engulf me. I had to make a decision. Should I push forward, seek the truth behind the voice, or retreat into the safety of my doubts? As the shadows searched, I felt the knife's weight in my hand. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I had to confront whatever was haunting my home. I had to find the answers, even if they led me into the darkness. With the weight of the knife steady in my grip, I faced the darkness swirling around me. The air was thick, heavy with tension, and the voice echoed in my mind, urging me forward. "Help me." The words reverberated through my thoughts, igniting a flicker of determination in my heart. I couldn't back down now. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my insides. The shadows flickered, coiling like smoke, teasing my senses. I could almost feel a presence just beyond the edge of my vision, something waiting, something yearning for release. I took a cautious step forward, the light from the living room illuminating the hallway ahead. The atmosphere shifted, every creak of the floorboards amplified in the stillness. My senses were heightened, every sound a reminder of my vulnerability. As I moved deeper into the darkness, the whispers returned, surrounding me like a tempest. They spoke in fragmented phrases, disjointed yet familiar. I could hear snippets of memories, echoes of laughter, the sound of a song that resonated from a distant past. It was hauntingly beautiful yet laced with sorrow. "Help me," the voice urged again, clearer this time. It was pleading, filled with a desperation that sent shivers down my spine. I followed the sound, letting it guide me through the haze. Each step felt like a descent into the unknown, but I couldn't stop now. The hallway stretched out before me, shadows dancing along the walls. The faint light flickered, illuminating photographs that hung in frames. They were familiar, snapshots of my life, moments captured in time. But there was something off about them. The faces in the pictures were distorted, twisted in expressions of anguish, their eyes hollow and pleading. I shuddered, forcing myself to look away. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice breaking the suffocating silence. "Why are you here?" "I need to be free," the voice responded, its tone sorrowful. "Help me break the curse." A chill ran down my spine. A curse? I had stumbled into something far deeper than I had anticipated. I pressed forward, drawn by instinct I couldn't fully understand. "How do I help you?" I demanded, desperation creeping into my voice. "Find the truth," it urged. "The answer lies within." Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging me into darkness once more. Panic surged as I fumbled in the gloom, disoriented and afraid. The whispers crescendoed, a haunting symphony that seemed to wrap around me, constricting like a vice. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted into the void. The shadows responded, swirling around me in a frenzy, as if my defiance had provoked them. Then, as if the darkness had ears, a faint glow began to emerge at the far end of the hallway. I squinted, trying to make out what lay ahead. With each step I took, the glow grew stronger, illuminating the corridor with a soft, ethereal light. It beckoned me forward, and against my better judgment, I followed. As I approached, the light revealed a door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of warmth spilling out into the cold shadows. I hesitated, a wave of uncertainty crashing over me. Was this the truth I sought, or another trap set by the darkness? "Help me," the voice pleaded again, resonating deep within me. I felt a pang of empathy, the weight of its sorrow pressing against my heart. I couldn't turn back now. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the light enveloping me like a warm embrace. The room was filled with a soft glow, illuminating every corner. It looked like an old study, cluttered with dusty books and faded photographs. An old record player sat in the corner, and the air was thick with a sense of nostalgia. At the center of the room, a figure stood, blurred and indistinct. I felt an overwhelming urge to reach out, to touch it and offer comfort. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What happened to you?" "I was once like you," the figure replied, its voice echoing through the space. "Trapped in my own fears, unable to escape. But I found a way, through music." As it spoke, I glanced around the room, noticing the records stacked haphazardly on a shelf. A wave of realization washed over me. The music that had haunted my nights, that had drawn me into this darkness, was a remnant of its past. "Is this your music?" I asked, feeling the connection between us deepen. "Is that why you're here?" "Yes," the figure nodded, its outline becoming clearer, more defined. "But the music is a curse, binding me to this place. You must play it, break the spell. Only then can I be free." Fear coiled in my stomach. "But what if it consumes me?" I asked, hesitation creeping into my voice. "It won't. You are stronger than you think," the figure assured me. "Embrace the music, let it guide you. Only then can we both be free." With a trembling heart, I walked over to the record player, my hand shaking as I lifted one of the dusty records. It felt heavy with untold stories, echoing with the weight of time. As I placed it on the turntable and set the needle down, the room filled with sound, a haunting melody that resonated deep within me. The music washed over me, each note stirring emotions I hadn't felt in years. It was beautiful and painful, a symphony of longing and sorrow. The shadows around me began to swirl, reacting to the sound, morphing into shapes and figures. I felt the energy shift, the oppressive weight of fear starting to lift. "Keep playing," the figure urged, its voice blending with the music. "You're doing it." As I lost myself in the melody, the shadows began to retreat, their hold on the room loosening. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the rhythm, feeling the music pulse through my veins. It was liberating, a release of all the tension that had built up over the past few weeks. But then, a sudden surge of darkness surged back, a wave of despair crashing over me. The whispers returned, now a chaotic cacophony, drowning out the music. "Don't stop," the figure shouted, its voice fighting against the rising tide. I gripped the edges of the record player, forcing myself to concentrate on the melody. The shadows twisted violently, but I refused to yield. The music was my anchor, and I poured every ounce of emotion into it. And then, in an explosive moment, the music crescendoed, the sound enveloping the room in a brilliant light. The shadows shrieked and writhed, the darkness finally breaking apart. I felt a rush of energy surge through me, an overwhelming sense of liberation. As the final notes played, the shadows evaporated into the ether, leaving only the soft glow of the room. The figure before me shimmered, becoming more defined. "Thank you," it whispered, the sorrow in its voice replaced with relief. "You've freed me." I stood there, breathless and overwhelmed, feeling the weight of what had just transpired. The music faded, leaving an echoing silence in its wake, yet I felt a sense of calm wash over me. But just as I thought it was over, I noticed a flicker in the corner of my eye. A shadow lingered just outside the door, watching me. The realization hit me, while I had freed one presence, there were still others lingering in the darkness, waiting to be confronted. "Who else is here?" I whispered, a fresh wave of anxiety creeping in. The figure nodded solemnly, the glow around it dimming. "You must be brave," it urged. "The darkness is not finished with you yet." With my heart racing, I stepped toward the door, ready to face whatever lay ahead. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. I took a deep breath, bracing myself as I approached the door. The soft glow of the room faded behind me, swallowed by the encroaching shadows of the hallway. As I stepped into the darkness, the atmosphere shifted, growing heavier with each passing moment. The faint echoes of the music still lingered in my mind, a bittersweet reminder of what I had just achieved, but I knew the fight was far from over. The shadows shifted, swirling around me, their shapes contorting as if sensing my resolve. "You've done well to free one," a voice slithered from the darkness, chilling my bones. It was deep and echoing, a sound that resonated with an unsettling familiarity. "But there are many more, and they will not let you go easily." I forced myself to stand tall, clutching the knife tightly, a symbol of my defiance. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. "What do you want from me?" "Fear," it replied, the shadows coalescing into a form that resembled a figure, vague and formless, yet undeniably threatening. "You've tasted it, haven't you? The rush of dread, the sweetness of despair. It feeds us, nourishes us. And you are ripe for the taking." Panic surged through me, but I pushed it aside. "I'm not afraid of you," I shouted, though I could feel the tremor in my voice. "You don't control me." "Ah, but do I not?" The figure stepped closer, the darkness pooling at its feet, a grotesque mockery of human form. "You carry your fears like a heavy cloak. You cannot shed them so easily." I felt the shadows pressing against me, curling around my legs, trying to drag me down. But I remembered the music, the warmth of the light, and the presence I had just freed. With a fierce determination, I thrust the knife forward, channeling all my energy into that single act of defiance. "Leave me!" I shouted, my voice rising above the cacophony of whispers that filled the air. "I will not be your prey." The figure recoiled as the knife pierced through the darkness. A flash of light erupted from the blade, momentarily illuminating the space. I felt a surge of power, a force pushing back against the shadows. The figure shrieked, its form flickering like a candle in the wind. But it wasn't enough. The shadows thickened, reasserting their hold. "You are but one," the voice taunted, now mocking. "What can you do against the collective?" With desperation clawing at my insides, I glanced around the hallway, searching for something, anything that could help. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating in their oppressive presence. I remembered the records, the music that had once filled this space with light. Music! I shouted, realization flooding over me. If the music could free one, maybe it can free more. With renewed determination, I sprinted back toward the study, the shadows lunging at me, but I evaded them. I reached the record player, my heart racing as I fumbled through the collection of dusty records. I needed something powerful, something that resonated with the energy of the room. Finally, I found a record marked with a golden emblem, a symbol I recognized from my childhood. It was a song my mother used to play, a melody woven with memories of warmth and love. I set the needle down, the familiar tune filling the air, each note vibrant and alive. The shadows recoiled, the music pushing back against their oppressive grasp. I felt the energy shift, the darkness wavering as the melody wrapped around me like a protective shield. I sang along, my voice blending with the music, allowing the warmth to flow through me. Join me! I cried into the shadows. Feel the light. Feel the freedom. As I sang, I noticed the silhouettes of others forming around me, figures trapped within the darkness, their faces contorted in anguish. They hesitated, caught between the despair of the shadows and the allure of the light. I extended my hands, beckoning them to come closer. Let the music set you free. I implored. You don't have to be afraid. One by one, they began to move toward the light, drawn by the melody and my desperate call. The shadows screamed, their forms twisting in agony as the music intensified. I felt their energy surging through me, each soul pulling away from the darkness, seeking the warmth of the light. Keep going, the figure from before urged, its voice now filled with urgency. You're breaking the curse. Don't stop. The music reached a fever pitch, filling every corner of the hallway with its radiant sound. The shadows shrieked in protest, but the figures continued to emerge, their forms becoming clearer, more defined. With each soul released, the darkness receded, losing its grip on the space. And then, in a moment of pure clarity, I understood. The power of the music wasn't just in the notes or the rhythm, it was in the connection it forged, the memories it evoked. It was a bridge between worlds, a pathway to freedom. As the last of the figures broke free, the darkness erupted in a final, anguished scream. The shadows collapsed, disintegrating into nothingness, leaving behind only the warmth of the light and the echoes of the melody. I fell to my knees, exhausted but elated. The room was filled with the soft glow of the records, now silent yet imbued with a sense of peace. I had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but I knew the battle would never truly end. The shadows might retreat, but they would always linger at the edges of our reality, waiting for a moment of weakness. Yet as I looked around, the figures that had once been trapped now stood with me, their faces illuminated by the soft light. They were no longer lost souls, they were free. And together, we had forged a bond that transcended the darkness. Thank you, one of them whispered, stepping forward. You saved us. I nodded, still catching my breath. We saved each other, I replied, feeling the weight of their gratitude wash over me. But even as I savored this moment, a part of me remained vigilant. I could sense the darkness lurking just beyond the edges of the light, ready to re-emerge at any moment. I would need to remain strong, to guard against it. The shadows were not just a battle to be fought, they were a constant reminder of our fears and vulnerabilities. With the warmth of the music still echoing in my heart, I turned to the group. Let's stay together, I said, determination flooding my voice. We'll face the darkness as one. And together, we stepped into the light, ready to confront whatever came next. Have you ever felt the weight of someone's gaze on you in the silence of the night? I never truly understood that sensation until I found myself on the late-night bus ride home. The bus was nearly empty, the dim lights flickering softly above me. It was a long day, and I was exhausted, my body heavy with fatigue. But as I settled into my seat, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Every night, it was the same routine. The bus would make its final stop, the doors would hiss open, and I would step off into the quiet darkness. But tonight felt different. As the bus rolled to a halt at the last stop, I caught a glimpse of a figure in the reflection of the window. He was seated at the back, a stranger with an unreadable expression, his eyes fixed intently on me. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself I was just tired. But as I stepped off the bus, I glanced back. He hadn't moved. The way he stared was unsettling, as if he was waiting for something, or perhaps someone. The air felt thick with an unspoken tension, and I could feel a shiver race down my spine. Shaking off the feeling, I walked towards my apartment building, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the stillness. Each step felt heavy, as though the night was trying to pull me back. I glanced over my shoulder once more, half expecting to find him standing there, but the bus was empty, its headlights cutting through the darkness like a searchlight. Inside my apartment, I tried to push the thought from my mind. I made tea, hoping the warmth would chase away the chill that had settled in my bones. But as I sat on the couch, the dim light flickering around me, I couldn't help but feel that I had brought something home with me. The next evening, I found myself waiting for the bus again. The anticipation mixed with anxiety as I climbed aboard, scanning the seats. There he was, sitting in the back, just as before. He didn't look at anyone else, his focus remained fixed on me, even as the bus jolted into motion. My heart raced, a mixture of fear and curiosity. Why was he staring? What did he want? I tried to concentrate on my phone, scrolling through my messages, but every time I looked up, he was still watching. The world outside blurred into a dull haze as my thoughts spiraled. When the bus reached the last stop, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. The doors opened, and the air was cold against my skin. I hesitated, looking back at him once more. This time, he smiled, a slow, unsettling grin that sent shivers through me. Then, without a word, he stood up and walked towards the front, his movements deliberate and calm. I stepped off the bus, urgency propelling me forward. I didn't dare look back as I walked briskly towards my apartment. The feeling of being watched clung to me like a shadow, and every step echoed with the sound of my pulse pounding in my ears. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moments from the bus in my mind. Who was he? Why did he look at me like that? The next day dragged on. I couldn't shake the paranoia that had settled in. I avoided taking the bus whenever I could, opting for a longer walk home instead. But the thought of him lingered, a ghost haunting my thoughts. As dusk fell, I reluctantly made my way to the bus stop, the chill in the air biting at my skin. I waited, my heart racing as I scanned the street for the familiar headlights. When the bus finally arrived, I took a deep breath and climbed aboard, my pulse quickening at the thought of seeing him again. But this time, he was not there. I searched the bus, anxiety creeping in. Had I escaped? The thought brought a brief sense of relief, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I found a seat and settled in, trying to ignore the growing unease in my stomach. The bus jolted forward, the rhythmic sound of the tires against the pavement a constant reminder of my isolation. As we passed familiar streets, I let my mind wander, only to be jolted back by the sudden stop at the last stop. I hesitated, glancing around. My heart sank as I noticed a movement at the back of the bus. The figure was there, emerging from the shadows, his eyes locked on mine. My breath caught in my throat as the door opened, and he stepped off, moving towards me with an eerie calm. I froze, caught in the grip of fear. What did he want? Why did he keep following me? My instincts screamed for me to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The figure approached, his expression unreadable, and I could feel the weight of his gaze pressing down on me. Then he spoke, his voice low and smooth. "You've been avoiding me." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I took a step back, my heart pounding. "I don't know you," I managed to say, my voice trembling. His smile widened, an unsettling glint in his eyes. "But I know you. You're the last passenger." And just like that, the world around me began to fade, the shadows closing in, and I was left standing at the edge of a nightmare. Panic surged through me. I turned to run, but my feet felt as if they were rooted to the ground. The night air chilled around me, and I could hear the distant hum of the city fading away. The only sound was the thumping of my heart, drowning out all rational thought. "What do you want from me?" I managed to stammer, my voice barely a whisper. I could see the figure inching closer, his movements deliberate, almost predatory. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that danced across the pavement. "You're the only one who sees me," he replied, his voice smooth, almost soothing. "Every night, you look for me, and here I am." A chill raced down my spine as his words sank in. It was true. Each night, I had found myself glancing back, searching for him. The thought made my skin crawl, and I shook my head in disbelief. "I'm not looking for you," I cried out, desperation spilling over. But he only smiled, a smile that felt like a secret. "You can't escape what you've invited into your life. You keep coming back." I backed away slowly, desperate to distance myself from his unsettling presence. But with each step, the shadows seemed to close in tighter, the darkness thickening as if it had a mind of its own. I could feel it swirling around me, whispering doubts and fears. "What do you mean I've invited you?" I gasped, my breath coming in short bursts. "I don't even know you." "Exactly," he replied, his tone dripping with amusement. "But I know you. I know your fears, your desires, the music you love, the people you miss. You've shared it all, whether you meant to or not." The ground felt like it was tilting beneath me, and the walls of my reality began to blur. His words resonated with something deep within me, a lingering sense of unease that had been festering for weeks. Had I truly opened a door I couldn't close? With a burst of adrenaline, I turned and sprinted down the street, my heart racing. I could hear him behind me, footsteps echoing in the silence. "You can't run from me," he called, his voice mocking. "You're part of this now." I reached my apartment building, fumbling with my keys, panic coursing through my veins. The door swung open, and I darted inside, slamming it shut behind me. My breath came in heaves as I leaned against the door, trying to steady myself. But it was not over. I could feel it. The sensation of being watched returned, crawling along my skin. I locked the door, but it felt inadequate, as if it wouldn't hold back whatever was lurking outside. I stumbled into the living room, my heart pounding. Everything felt off, the shadows in the corners seemed to shift, elongating as if reaching out for me. I turned on the lights, flooding the space with harsh brightness, but it only emphasized the looming darkness outside. As I paced the room, I heard a faint noise. A tapping sound, soft yet persistent, coming from the window. My stomach twisted as I approached, dread pooling in my chest. I pulled the curtain aside and looked out, expecting to see nothing, perhaps just the empty street. But instead, I saw him standing there, just outside my window, his eyes glinting in the light. I stumbled back, breathless. "What do you want?" I shouted, voice trembling. "Let me in," he replied, his tone calm and eerily soothing. "I just want to talk." "Get away from me," I yelled, adrenaline coursing through me. "You're not real." "Oh, I'm very real," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And so are you. We're connected, you and I. You can't deny it." My mind raced. I could feel the walls closing in, the reality of my situation becoming more suffocating. Was I losing my mind? Or was there something truly sinister at play? I turned away from the window, my thoughts spiraling. I had to escape this. I grabbed my phone, hoping to call someone, anyone, to break the hold this nightmare had on me. But as I reached for it, I froze. The tapping had stopped. A silence enveloped the room, thick and oppressive. I glanced back at the window, dread curling in my stomach. He was gone. Relief washed over me, mingling with disbelief. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I could put this behind me. I sank onto the couch, clutching my phone, taking deep breaths to calm my racing heart. But just as I thought I could breathe again, I heard it, the faintest sound of music. It started low, like a distant melody, slowly growing louder. My heart dropped as I recognized it. It was a song I loved, one that held memories I tried to keep buried. The music swelled, filling the room with an eerie familiarity. I glanced at the window again, half expecting him to be back. But he wasn't. The music continued, weaving around me, pulling at my thoughts, wrapping me in its embrace. I was trapped, caught between reality and something far more sinister. I couldn't tell if the music was a comfort or a threat. All I knew was that it was coming for me, just as he had. The night stretched on, the music echoing in my mind, and I realized the true horror. I couldn't escape the last passenger. He was already inside me. The music enveloped me, a haunting lullaby that tugged at my heart. Each note felt familiar, yet distorted, twisting memories into something unrecognizable. I wanted to shut it out, to drown it in silence, but it seeped into my bones, filling every corner of my mind. I clutched my phone, trying to steady my racing thoughts. The shadows in the room danced with the rhythm of the melody, and I felt their presence growing heavier, pressing in around me. I forced myself to breathe, but every inhale felt charged with the weight of his gaze. "Stop it!" I shouted into the silence, my voice echoing against the walls. "You don't belong here." The music faltered for a brief moment, but then resumed, louder and more insistent. Panic surged within me as I realized it wasn't just a song, it was a message, a call I couldn't ignore. I felt my pulse quicken, a rush of adrenaline flooding my system. I needed to confront this. If I didn't face whatever was happening, I would be consumed by it. I stood up, determination mingling with fear, and moved to the window once more. The night outside was dark, but I was done running. "Show yourself," I yelled, my voice trembling but resolute. "What do you want from me?" Silence stretched, broken only by the soft hum of the music. But as I gazed out, the street appeared different. Shadows flickered, and the streetlights cast eerie halos around dark figures. It was as if the very essence of the night was alive, watching me with unseen eyes. "Let me in," a whisper echoed from the depths of the shadows, chilling me to the bone. I stepped back instinctively, fear clawing at my throat. I shook my head, pushing the overwhelming sense of dread aside. "You're not real. This is all in my head." "Am I?" The voice was soft yet sharp, slicing through my denial. "You feel me, don't you? You can't escape what you've created." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was feeding into this nightmare, letting it unravel me. I glanced around the room, searching for something, anything, that could ground me in reality. My eyes landed on the clock. It was ticking steadily, a reminder that time still existed despite the chaos in my mind. As I steadied myself, the music shifted, becoming more complex. I recognized snippets of my own past woven into the melody, fragments of laughter, echoes of conversations I thought long forgotten. Each note was a reminder of moments I cherished, twisted now into something sinister. "Stop!" I shouted, but the music crescendoed, drowning out my words. The walls began to close in, the shadows warping into shapes that felt too real, too threatening. I spun around, looking for a way out, but the air was thick with an unseen force that held me captive. Desperation clawed at me, and I stumbled back to the couch, sinking into its embrace. I covered my ears, but the music seeped through my fingers, relentless. "Get away from me!" I screamed, tears streaming down my face. Then, in the midst of the chaos, I heard it, a soft rustling sound, like fabric brushing against itself. I froze, every nerve ending on high alert. It came from the hallway, just beyond the living room. I strained to listen, the music fading into the background as I focused on the sound. Someone, or something, was there. The realization sent chills racing down my spine. I was no longer alone. The rustling grew louder, accompanied by a low, rhythmic thump that echoed through the silence. My heart pounded in my chest, a steady drumbeat of fear. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice quaking. "Show yourself." No response. Only the sound of the thumping, growing closer, more insistent. I felt my breath catch in my throat, each beat of my heart urging me to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was vague at first, an outline against the darkened hallway. As it stepped into the light, I could see him, the last passenger, his eyes locked onto mine with an intensity that sent waves of panic crashing over me. "You invited me in," he said, his voice smooth, almost tender. "And now you must face the truth of what you've created." I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. "No. You're just a figment of my imagination." "Am I?" He took a step forward, and I recoiled, the reality of his presence crashing down around me. "You've let your fears manifest into something real. I'm here because you called for me. Get away from me." I shouted, but he only smiled, a twisted reflection of comfort that sent a shiver down my spine. As he closed the distance between us, the music swelled once more, filling the room with a cacophony of sound that echoed my inner turmoil. I felt trapped in my own mind, unable to distinguish between reality and the nightmare he represented. "Face me," he urged, his voice softening. "I'm not your enemy. I'm a part of you. Stop it." I screamed, my voice breaking. "You're not real. But as I looked into his eyes, I felt a flicker of recognition. He wasn't just a stranger, he was the embodiment of my fears, my doubts, everything I had pushed aside. The realization crashed over me, and I felt the world tilt dangerously. "Embrace me," he said, and the shadows twisted around us, closing in like a suffocating embrace. In that moment, I understood. I could no longer run from this. I had to confront the darkness that lurked within me, the fears I had buried. With a surge of defiance, I stood tall, forcing myself to meet his gaze. "You don't control me. I control my fears." The music stopped abruptly, and for a moment, silence enveloped us. The shadows receded, and the figure paused, surprise flickering across his face. "Is that so?" he whispered, a hint of intrigue in his voice. "Yes," I declared, my voice steady. "You are not my master. You are a part of me, but I am stronger than my fears." In that instant, I felt a shift within me. The oppressive weight of dread began to lift, replaced by a strange sense of clarity. The last passenger, once menacing, now seemed less threatening, his form softening into something more familiar. "Then let's face this together," he said, his tone shifting, no longer predatory. "You are not alone in this battle." As the shadows faded, I felt the heaviness in my chest begin to dissipate. The music transformed, evolving into a gentle melody that wrapped around us like a warm embrace. I realized that this wasn't just a confrontation, it was a journey towards understanding. In that moment, I chose to embrace the darkness within, to understand it instead of fearing it. The last passenger was no longer a threat, but a reminder of my own strength, my resilience. Together, I whispered, feeling a newfound sense of empowerment wash over me. And as the shadows receded, I knew I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, facing the fears that had held me captive for far too long. As the music swelled gently around us, I felt a shift in the air, a transformation that made the atmosphere lighter. The last passenger, once a harbinger of dread, stood beside me, his presence now almost comforting. "You've taken the first step," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "But there is more to uncover." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart still racing but no longer from fear. The sense of urgency was different now. It was a call to delve deeper into the shadows of my mind. The shadows are not just fears, they are memories, pieces of you that you have forgotten or buried, he explained. Each note of the music represents a part of your story. I looked around, the room now illuminated by a soft glow that seemed to emanate from within. The shadows that once loomed ominously now danced playfully, as if inviting me to join them. "What do I need to do?" I asked, feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity. "Listen closely," he replied, gesturing towards the wall where the shadows converged. "The music holds the key to your past. Embrace it." Taking a deep breath, I stepped closer to the wall. The shadows writhed and twisted, forming shapes that felt familiar yet distant. I closed my eyes, allowing the music to wash over me, each note resonating within my soul. Images began to surface, fragments of laughter, moments of joy, and even sorrow. Faces appeared in the shadows, friends, family, and memories I had long forgotten. I could feel the warmth of their presence, but alongside it came the pang of loss. Suddenly, a specific memory hit me like a wave. I was a child again, playing in the backyard with my sister. Her laughter rang in my ears, bright and clear, before being replaced by the sound of an argument between my parents. The shift was jarring, and I felt the weight of unresolved emotions flooding back. The last passenger stood beside me, watching with an understanding gaze. You've carried this weight for too long. It's time to let it go. But I don't want to remember, I admitted, tears streaming down my cheeks. Some memories hurt too much. That pain is a part of your journey, he said gently. You can't move forward without acknowledging where you've come from. Embrace the joy and the sorrow, they make you whole. I took a deep breath, allowing the emotions to wash over me. I felt the shadows shift again, the music blending with my memories, each note intertwining with my past. Slowly, I began to accept the pain as part of my story, not something to be feared. The laughter of my sister filled the air, and I could almost feel her hand in mine. I miss you, I whispered into the darkness. I'm sorry I let you go. With that acknowledgement, the shadows brightened and the music shifted to a more uplifting melody. I felt a surge of warmth, as if the memories were embracing me, inviting me to let go of the burden I had carried. You are not alone, the last passenger said softly. You never were. With newfound strength, I opened my eyes and turned to him. What's next? Now, we face the culmination of your fears, he replied, his expression serious yet encouraging. You've begun to heal, but there is still a final confrontation waiting for you. What do you mean? I asked, confusion creeping in. There is a darkness that you must confront, the root of your fears. It has held you captive for too long, he explained, gesturing towards the shadows that still lingered at the edges of the room. My heart raced again, but this time it was different. I felt empowered, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Lead the way. He nodded, and together we approached the deepest shadows, where the air felt heavy and thick. The music transformed once more, becoming haunting yet beautiful, echoing the tension in my chest. As we stepped into the darkness, the shadows coalesced into a singular form, a dark figure that loomed ominously, eyes glinting like shards of glass. My breath caught in my throat, and I instinctively took a step back. Who are you? I demanded, though my voice wavered. I am the culmination of your fears, the embodiment of everything you've hidden away, the figure replied, its voice a chilling whisper that sent shivers down my spine. You cannot escape me. I'm not afraid of you. I shouted, summoning the courage I had discovered. You're just a reflection of my pain. The figure laughed, a sound that echoed through the space, reverberating within me. Pain is your prison. You've created this to shield yourself from reality. No more, I said firmly, glancing at the last passenger. He nodded encouragingly, and I felt the strength of our shared resolve. With a deep breath, I faced the figure. I acknowledge my pain, but it does not define me. I am stronger than you think. The shadows flickered in response, and the figure's laughter faded, replaced by an unsettling stillness. You think you can banish me so easily? I don't need to banish you, I replied, my voice steady. I need to understand you. You're a part of my journey, and I refuse to let you control my life any longer. The darkness wavered, uncertainty creeping into its form. The music shifted again, this time filling the space with a powerful crescendo. Each note surged through me, igniting a fire of determination. As I stood my ground, I felt the shadows begin to recede, unraveling the darkness that had loomed over me for so long. The figure flickered, its form becoming less distinct, as if the very essence of my fears was dissolving in the light of my acceptance. Face it, you are just an echo of what I've experienced, I said, my voice strong and unwavering. You cannot control me anymore. In that moment, the figure dissolved into a swirl of darkness, and the music transformed into a triumphant melody that filled the space with light. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The last passenger smiled, his form shimmering with warmth. You have faced your fears and embraced your past. You are free now. As the shadows melted away completely, I stood in the brightness, feeling a sense of liberation wash over me. I had confronted the darkness within, and though it would always be a part of my journey, it no longer held power over me. I'm ready for whatever comes next, I said, feeling empowered. I will face it all. The last passenger nodded, his expression proud. Then let's step into the light together. And as we walked forward, hand in hand, I knew that I had reclaimed my story, ready to embrace the future with open arms. As we stepped into the light, the world around us transformed. The once confining shadows faded into a bright, expansive landscape. I felt as if I had emerged from a long, dark tunnel into a new reality, one filled with potential and hope. The music shifted to a harmonious blend, a celebration of my newfound clarity. Where are we? I asked, looking around in awe. The landscape was vibrant, with colors more vivid than I had ever seen. It felt alive, pulsing with energy, as if reflecting the awakening within me. This is your new beginning, the last passenger replied, his presence radiating warmth. You've let go of the burdens that held you back, and now you have the freedom to explore your true self. I took a deep breath, savoring the fresh air that filled my lungs. What does that mean for me? I wondered, excitement and apprehension mingling in my chest. It means you can embrace your passions, confront challenges head-on, and forge connections with those around you, he explained. You have the strength to create your own path. As I moved forward, I felt a spark of creativity igniting within me. Memories flooded back, hobbies I had abandoned, dreams I had silenced, and the people I had distanced myself from. Each step I took felt lighter, as if the weight of fear had been replaced by the lightness of possibility. I want to reconnect with everything I've lost, I declared, determination surging within me. I want to embrace life fully. The last passenger nodded, his expression encouraging. Then let's begin. What do you wish to pursue first? I paused, reflecting on the moments that brought me joy. I want to write again. I used to love putting my thoughts on paper, but I let fear stop me. Then write, he urged. Let your voice be heard. I closed my eyes, feeling the energy around me. As I opened them, a notebook appeared in my hands, blank pages waiting for my words. I sat down in the vibrant grass, the sunlight warming my skin, and began to write. Words flowed like a river, spilling from my heart onto the pages. I poured out my fears, my hopes, and everything I had learned through this journey. Each stroke of the pen felt liberating, as if I was releasing the remnants of my past while embracing my future. Time became irrelevant as I lost myself in the act of creation. The music enveloped me, harmonizing with my thoughts, echoing the rhythm of my heartbeat. The last passenger sat nearby, watching with a proud smile, encouraging me silently. As I wrote, I began to weave in the lessons I had learned about fear, acceptance, and the importance of facing one's truth. I wrote about the darkness and the light, how they coexist, and how acknowledging both is vital to living authentically. Hours passed, or maybe it was only moments, I couldn't tell. But as I put down the pen, I felt a sense of fulfillment I hadn't experienced in a long time. I looked up, and the landscape shimmered around me, vibrant and alive, reflecting my inner transformation. I did it, I whispered, a smile spreading across my face. You embraced your voice, the last passenger said, his eyes shining. This is just the beginning. What else do you want to explore? With renewed energy, I rose to my feet. I want to reconnect with people, friends, family. I want to share my experiences, to inspire others to face their fears. Then let's do that, he replied, gesturing for me to follow him. We walked through this new landscape, where vibrant colors blended together, creating an atmosphere of connection and warmth. As we ventured further, I noticed figures appearing in the distance, familiar faces emerging from the shadows of my memory. Friends I had lost touch with, family members I had distanced myself from, all standing together, smiling, beckoning me forward. I felt a surge of emotion as I approached them. "I've missed you all," I exclaimed, my heart swelling with joy. "I want to reconnect, to share my journey with you." They welcomed me with open arms, and in that moment, I felt a profound sense of belonging. We shared stories, laughter, and tears, weaving our lives together once more. Each connection I rekindled filled my heart with warmth, a reminder of the power of human relationships. The last passenger stood back, watching with pride as I embraced each person, grateful for the bonds that had shaped me. "You've done well," he said softly. "Remember, these connections will help you through any darkness that may come." "I will," I promised, looking back at him. "Thank you for guiding me through this." He smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "You did the hard work. I was merely a reflection of your strength. Now, you can carry this light within you." With a final glance around this vibrant landscape, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The shadows that once haunted me had transformed into lessons, guiding me to a deeper understanding of myself. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over everything, I realized that this journey was only the beginning. The darkness I had faced was not an ending, but a necessary part of my growth, shaping me into the person I was meant to be. Together with my friends and family, I stepped into the future, ready to embrace all that life had to offer. With every word I wrote, every connection I made, I would carry the light of understanding and acceptance with me, forever transformed by my journey through the shadows. This has been a long, dark journey through the night with Whisper Crowley. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Leave a like if these stories made you look at the darkness a little differently, and share in the comments what you enjoyed most or what gave you chills. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next Sinister Whispers. Until we meet again in the world of shadows.